Chapter 1 Immortal Fate. Chapter 1 Immortal Fate. In Pingyang Town, one of the many small towns under the jurisdiction of Tsanglang City that belonged to the country of Diqi, a group of cavalry gradually entered the town. The leader was clad in armor and wearing a firm and resolute expression. He was Chao Gang, one of the 5 wolf guards of Tsanglang City. The other individual was a young man with clear, bright eyes and delicate features. He wore a green robe and exuded a strong scholarly aura. The young man's name was Su Zimo, the second young master of the Su family in Pingyang Town. He was a famous household name, having passed the provincial examination at the young age of 17. Second young master Su is different from the other scholars that I know of. You may look frail, but you have excellent riding skills. They are as good as that of my guards, Chao Gang said. Lord Chao is too generous with your praise. Su Zimo gave a faint smile. My elder brother has been in the business of selling horses for a long time. Horses have been my companions since I was a child. I have some foundation. Moreover, Zhe Feng is quite spiritual. Having said that, Su Zimo patted the fine horse that he was riding. That horse by the name of Zhe Feng seemed to have understood Su Zimo's praise. It looked up and responded with a snort, revealing an intelligent gleam in its eye. At this moment, loud noises could be heard nearby. Someone was shouting, "Big news! I heard that girl of the Shen family has been chosen by the Immortals. She is going to be accepted into the Immortal sect." The girl in the Shen family? Which Shen family? It's Shen Mingqi, the one who is in marriage talks with second young master Su. The news had spread rapidly. The people in the surrounding area were already beginning to discuss this. Many people were casting peculiar looks at Su Zimo. Immortal? Su Zimo murmured quietly. His knowledge of immortals still remained at those in the illusory legends. Would humans possess the power to summon wind and rain, burn the sky and boil the sea? If he did not see it with his own eyes, Su Zimo did not believe that immortals existed in this word. At the sound of the word immortal, Chao Gang's body quivered. He wore a strange expression. Worry and fear flashed across his eyes. However, Su Zimo did not notice this as he was frowning and deep in his own thoughts. At this very moment, a beam of light suddenly flashed across the sky with lightning speed. Just as it flew across Su Zimo's head, it reversed and stopped in midair. Everyone looked up instinctively. They could see 3 people standing in the air without any form of support. Seemingly, invisible powers were holding on to them. Su Zimo's expression changed slightly. Immortal! Ordinary mortals would neither understand nor come into contact with such skills. The Immortal has made its presence. Immortal, please bestow us your blessings. The impenetrable and dense crowd knelt and kowtowed at the same time. They were muttering prayers, their faces full of fear and reverence. Chao Gang was extremely quick in his movement. He alighted from the horse and knelt on the ground, shouting loudly. Tsanglang City's commoner, Chao Gang, pays respect to the Immortal. Su Zimo was shocked by Gao Gang's action. As one of the 5 wolf guards, Chao Gang had extreme power and authority within hundreds of miles of radius from Tsanglang City. Yet, upon seeing the Immortal, he knelt to him without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was sticking out like a sore thumb on his horse. He looked extremely eye-catching in the black sea of people who were all kneeling. There was pressure everywhere. Su Zimo was silent for a moment. He leaped down from Zhe Feng and looked up. In midair, the man in the middle of the trio was dressed in a long turquoise robe. He looked cold and aloof. His pair of long and narrow eyes gazed at the people below his feet, emitting an overbearing aura of arrogance from between his brows. Beside the turquoise-robed man stood a man and a woman, both from Pingyang Town. The man's name was Zhou Dingyan. He was the most infamous rogue in the town who bullied men, ravished women, and carried out all sorts of evil doings. 2 years ago, Su Zimo sent him to prison. Now, that turquoise-robed man had taken him out of prison. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Given Zhou Dingyan's temperament and conduct, he could have a chance to enter the Immortal sect as well? If Zhou Dingyan were to become an immortal, how many people would suffer as a result? Su Zimo's gaze turned to the young girl standing midair. The young girl's name was Shinmingchi. At a prime age of 16, her complexion was fairer than snow, and she exuded a natural and gentle charisma. Su Zimo had deciphered Shinmingchi's intent through her eyes. Their once promise had become so vulnerable in the face of the legendary immortal fate. Su Zimo did not expect to see such a scene when the two met again. One was high and mighty in heaven and the other was standing on mortal ground. Shinmingchi was also gazing at Su Zimo, a man that she had once admired so greatly. Once, Su Zimo was invincible in her heart. Enlightened at 3 years old, proficient with the 4 books and 5 classics at 7 years old, passed the college examination at 12 years old, and completed the provincial examination at 17 years old. Such a talent was unprecedented in the country of Dichi. He would definitely become a giant among men in the future. Under the intervention of elder young Master Su Zimo had never learned martial arts. Even so, Shinmingchi believed that Su Zimo would also be able to rise in the official rankings if he were to pick up martial arts. However, Shinmingchi discovered that she had been wrong. Su Zimo's achievements ultimately belonged to the mortal world. It was not worth a mention in the eyes of the immortals. It was just an opportunity, and she was already qualified to look down on Su Zimo. "Mortal, why aren't you kneeling?" All of a sudden, the sound of this interrogation exploded by Su Zimo's ears like thunder striking across the ground. Dizzy and numb, he almost fell to the ground. He did not mind kneeling to the legendary immortal. However, the attitude of the turquoise-robed man was too much like that of a bully. It triggered feelings of injustice in Su Zimo's heart. These feelings of injustice arose from the resoluteness in Shinmingchi's eyes, the doubts on the immortal's criteria on choosing disciples, and his own pride. Su Zimo took a deep breath and suppressed the annoyance in his heart. He said loudly, "I have received scholarly honors all my life. I can even choose not to kneel to the ruler of Dichi. Why do I have to kneel to you? The more you wanted me to kneel, the more I refused to." The so-called scholarly honors were of course Su Zimo's excuses. Shrouded by the domineering aura of the turquoise-robed man, the commoners in the surrounding were keeping mum out of fear. They dared not even lift up their head. On the other hand, Su Zimo's aura did not seem any weaker although he was confronting the immortal as an ordinary man. "True enough, you are a foolish mortal." The corners of the turquoise-robed man's mouth curled up slightly. His gaze was cold and aloof as he said calmly, "Since that is the case, from today onwards, your scholarly honors will be written off." His tone was monotonous, but there was no doubt about it. The turquoise-robed man continued to say, "Whichever state that dares to accept this individual as an official will be declaring themselves as an enemy of Iridescent Cloud's palace and me, perfected Tsang Lang." At the sound of the few words Iridescent Cloud's palace and perfected Tsang Lang, Chao Gang, who had been kneeling, was dumbstruck. He quickly said in a quivering voice, "Perfected, be rest assured. In the country of Dichi, Su Zimo will be an inferior commoner for life." An inferior commoner for life. With just a few words, Su Zimo's destiny had been decided. There was a flash of reluctance in Shinmingchi's eyes. On the other hand, that rascal Zhou Dingyan was looking thrilled. Su Zimo looked very calm, as if this did not impact him. After a while, Su Zimo laughed and mocked himself. "If scholarly honors are so cheap, what do I need them for?" Perfected Tsang Lang's long and narrow eyes gradually formed a line, beams of icy cold lights flashing in them. Su Zimo's provocation had aroused his murderous intent. At this moment, Zhui Feng, who was standing beside Su Zimo, suddenly became agitated and uneasy. His hooves rubbed against the ground and he neighed continuously. Su Zimo was expressionless, but his heart jumped. Zhui Feng had also behaved in this way during the few occasions that he had encountered danger in the past. "It is actually a spiritual beast. Hermp, how dare he cause a ruckus in front of me?" Perfected Tsang Lang gave a faint yell. He stretched out his index finger and pointed it at Zhui Feng lightly. There was no time to react. A flash of red light had already entered Zhui Feng's body. Under the gaze of everyone, a gush of scorching flame surged out from within Zhui Feng's body and engulfed Zhui Feng in a matter of moments. Swoosh! This flame was strong and was actually going to engulf Su Zimo too. Su Zimo was not as weak as the typical scholar. However, he had never seen such eccentric methods. He was completely stunned and stood rooted to the ground. With Su Zimo almost engulfed by the flames, Zhui Feng neighed sorrowfully and galloped away madly. Petrified, the crowd fled in all directions. Just after a few steps, Zhui Feng fell to the ground listlessly. In the blink of an eye, it had been burnt into a cloud of ash. Neither the corpse nor bones was left. The entire process occurred within the moments of a few breaths. Such flame definitely did not belong to the mortal world. One could just imagine. If Zhui Feng had not galloped away in time and Su Zimo were to catch on to any of the flame, his life would definitely not be spared. This is a psychic fine horse that protects its master. What a pity! Chao Gang, the wolf guard, exclaimed his regrets quietly. There was a gentle breeze. Zhui Feng's ash was floating in the air and did not dissipate for a long time. It seemed to be saying goodbye to its master. Su Zimo looked at the other party dazedly, tears welling up in his eyes. His lost and distracted demeanor made one's heart ache for him. Perfected Song Lang did not manage to kill Su Zimo on this occasion. There was a flicker of coldness in his eyes. He was having murderous intent again. Master, forget it. He is just a mortal. Why do you need to lower yourself to his level? Shinmingchi said in a low voice as she looked at the Su Zimo beneath her. She eventually could not bear to harm him. Perfected Song Lang hesitated a little. If he had to take actions continuously to deal with someone, it would certainly lower his status. Zhou Dingyun did not wish to let Su Zimo off so easily. He quickly said, Master, you have to nip this problem in the bud to eliminate it completely, in case this person becomes your greatest problem in the future. Perfected Sang Lang was initially undecided. Upon hearing Zhou Dingyun's words, feelings of arrogance rose in his heart. He smirked and said, He is just an inferior commoner without any spirit root. He won't be able to cultivate for life. In terms of potential, he can't even be compared to that beast earlier. So what if I spare his inferior life? Is he fit to become the greatest problem in my life? Maybe in the next life. Zhou Dingyun secretly cursed. He did not expect his words to be counterproductive. Su Zimo was silent. He quietly picked up a handful of Zhui Feng's ash, turned and left. A hint of sarcasm flashed across Perfected Song Lang's eyes. He said lightly, Although the inferior ant yearns for the sky, how can they ever touch the eagle's wings? At the sight of Su Zimo leaving unscathed, Zhou Dingyun looked indignant. If not for this person, he would not have suffered so badly in prison. At the thought of this, Zhou Dingyun's eyes turned resentful and vicious. His expression was as capricious as the weather. One was uncertain what he was scheming about. Looking at Su Zimo's lonely and sad silhouette, Shinmingchi quietly sighed in her heart. In less than half an hour, this man had lost everything. Perhaps he was only left with that pitiful pride. However, what was the use of that? Sai, second young master Su had lost his honors and became an inferior commoner. He is no different from a good-for-nothing now. The two young masters of the Su family. One is good in martial arts, and the other a scholar. In recent years, they have the potential to rise in power and ranks. Unexpectedly, they have been dealt with such a blow. Fortunately, elder young master Su is a Connate expert. What's the use of being a Connate expert? That Lord Chao of Tsang Lang is also a Connate expert. Didn't he also kneel in fear upon seeing the Immortal? Based on the Immortal's words, second young master Su is not even fit to cultivate. I'm afraid he will eventually die of depression. Su Zimo lowered his head. He walked on quietly, seemingly oblivious to the discussions of the passers-by. Zimo, wait a minute. This voice was so familiar. Yet, the address was somewhat strange. Before today, the girl behind him had always addressed him intimately as Brother Zimo. Su Zimo continued to walk, without halting a step. Shinmingchi caught up with him. There were delicate beads of sweat on the tip of her nose, and she was frowning slightly. Panting, she said, "Zimo, have you become a fool by studying too much? What does it matter if you kneel down for a while?" "It doesn't matter. But I am not willing to," Zimo said calmly. Shinmunchi was already angry at Zimo for not stopping for her. Upon hearing this, she was furious. She quickened her steps and blocked Zimo's path. "Zimo, sober up!" Shinmunchi stared at Zimo's eyes and said loudly, "Don't think about revenge. It is impossible. You are already 17 years old and have missed the best age to learn martial arts. Moreover, you don't have the spirit root and can't cultivate at all. Even if you were to attain the postnatal or Connate levels, they are mortal abilities. It is still vulnerable before the immortal." Zimo was silent. He looked at Shinmunchi quietly. Shinmunchi could not withstand Zimo's gaze. She lowered her head and said softly, "Yes, we did have a promise. I am also grateful to you for helping the Shin family all these years. But they are already a thing of the past. Moreover, we are people from two different worlds henceforth." Zimo laughed. He raised his eyebrow. "Is your world so great?" Shinmunchi said. "Zhou Dingyun and I will be leaving Pingyang town with the perfected tomorrow. I came to bid you farewell. I don't wish to argue with you on these meaningless things. Go ahead. I am not able to send you off. We will meet again if we have fate." Zimo was downhearted. He walked past Shinmunchi and moved on. Just as the two rubbed shoulders with each other, he heard Shinmunchi mutter softly, "Our fate has come to an end. We are separated as mortals and immortals. I'm afraid we will not see each other again." Zimo paused slightly in his steps. In the end, he walked away without saying another word. Chapter 2 Mysterious Lady. Chapter 2 Mysterious Lady. This came as a strong blow to Zimo. It had totally changed how he looked at this world. It turned out there were indeed immortals in this world. With their powers, any immortal could be above the country, notwithstanding their backers, Iridescent Cloud's palace. To Zimo, it was nothing to lose his scholarly honors. But Jui Feng was his companion since a young age. It was more than a horse to him, it was his closest kin. Not long after, Zimo reached his mansion. This mansion was small and deserted. There were only a few rooms. His older brother Su Hong rewarded him with this mansion when he passed the college examination at 12 years old. Zimo carried Jui Feng's ashes and buried them beside the peach blossom tree in the center of the courtyard. "Jui Feng, I planted the peach blossom tree by myself. It will keep you company in the future. There will be a day where I will pour the blood of perfected Sang Lang on your ashes." Zimo's eyes turned red. He stood by the peach blossom tree quietly for a long while before he turned to leave. Zimo caught sight of someone as he turned to leave. It was a woman in a blood-red robe. She was beautiful. She was not flirtatious nor garish. She did not put on any makeup. She seemed like someone who had just come out from a painting. Zimo sighed. Like the ancient saying, she was a natural beauty, seemingly like a hibiscus that rose out of clear water. Despite being an exquisite beauty free from worldly cares, she was dressed in a scarlet, blood-red long robe. It did not seem to match, but the contrast created a unique aura about her. 2 years ago, Zimo returned home to find an unconscious lady near Tsanglang Mountains. He was worried that she might be eaten by the beasts, and hence he brought her back with him. The red-robed lady regained consciousness not long after she reached the mansion. She seemed to be well. However, she refused to say a word no matter how Zimo asked about her name or place of residence. The red-robed lady had lived here for 2 years, and Zimo never tried to drive her away. There was no servants in the mansion. Zimo was not used to being waited on. He took care of his 3 meals a day by himself. To him, it was nothing to have one more person in the mansion. All he needed to do was to prepare one more serving of food. In the past 2 years, whenever Zimo prepared the meals, he would bring one portion to the red-robed lady. He would put the food outside her room, knock on the door, and leave. The red-robed lady rarely appeared, and Su Zimo had never seen her venture outside the mansion. The two of them had not even had a proper conversation before. The Su family and Pingyang town did not know of her existence. The lady's name was Daiyu. She was reclusive and was a person of few words. That was all that Su Zimo knew about her. Su Zimo had no idea since when Daiyu stood behind him. However, it seemed strange in the way Daiyu looked at him today. He could not put it into words. Su Zimo nodded towards her and went back to his room. Both of them had already become used to this form of greeting in the past 2 years. Besides, Su Zimo knew that even if he spoke to her, Daiyu would ignore him. Su Zimo shut the door and took out a sharp knife with a 1-foot-long handle from the corner. It was rusty. It seemed like it had not been used for ages. Su Zimo searched around before he took out a whetstone. He looked solemn as he sprinkled water on it. There was a cold glare in his eyes as he sharpened the knife. After a short while, Su Zimo seemed to think of something. He pushed the door open and looked at Daiyu, who was at the courtyard. "Miss Daiyu, have an early rest today. You must not come out of your room if you hear any sounds tonight." Daiyu made no comments. She remained cold and aloof. Su Zimo could not help but have a strange notion inside his head. Daiyu, who was right in front of him, resembled an immortal in terms of her temperament and the way she conducted herself. She was graceful and beyond worldly cares, indifferent to everything around her. A true immortal would never get angry and injure people just because a mortal refused to kneel down before him. Of course, this was just his thoughts. Su Zimo did not think too much about it. Su Zimo carried a jar of wine from the cellar in the courtyard. He dusted the mud off and deliberately spilled some strong wine on the way back to his room. Upon reaching the door, Su Zimo let go of the jar of wine and it shattered onto the floor. The wine was spilled all over the floor, giving off a strong smell. Daiyu witnessed the entire scene. There was a vague smile in the corner of her lips. Su Zimo went into the room but did not shut the door tightly, leaving it unlatched. Su Zimo went to the corner and continued to sharpen the knife. It was destined to be chaotic tonight. Su Zimo waited. He was waiting for a person. The dark night had come. A sneaky figure trailed along the wall and slipped into Su Zimo's mansion. He made quite a large commotion when he landed on the floor. The dark figure rushed to the corner agilely. The dark figure waited for a while in the corner. The courtyard seemed quiet, and there was not the slightest abnormality. The dark figure finally stood up and took out a dagger from his waist. The cold dagger glittered in the dark. Through the glitter of the dagger, one could vaguely tell that it was Zhou Dingyun who joined the Immortal sect together with Shin Mingqi. Zhou Dingyun was one who sought revenge over the smallest grievance. Initially, he was wary of the Su family and Su Zimo, who had scholarly honors. Now that Su Zimo was reduced to an inferior commoner, while he had joined the Immortal sect, soaring to new heights, he would not let Su Zimo go easily. Besides, he would kill Su Zimo without anyone knowing tonight, and leave Pingyang town with perfected Sang Lang tomorrow. Even if the Su family realized the murder, they would not dare to make trouble, otherwise perfected Sang Lang might exterminate their entire family when angered. Zhou Dingyun was not highly skilled except that he was strong and had physical strength. He believed that it would be easy to take down a frail scholar. He treaded carefully and smelled the fragrance of strong wine. He swept his gaze across the courtyard and noticed that there was a broken jar of wine in front of one of the rooms. Ha! Zhou Dingyun felt reassured. He grinned. Indeed, you have not suffered any setbacks before and decided to drown one's sorrows in wine. You must be dead drunk now. It is just nice. I will cut off the tendons of your hands and legs and take the time to torture you. Zhou Dingyun swaggered to the door of the room. The room was unlatched. He peeped through the door and saw that there seemed to be a person lying on the bed. But the light was weak, therefore he could not see clearly. Zhou Dingyun did not stop to think but pushed the door open with a menacing look on his face, dashing into the room. There was an even stronger smell of wine in the room. Zhou Dingyun frowned and walked stealthily toward the bed. When he was about to reach the bed, a shadow came out from behind the door like a ghost. Suddenly, there was a cold light in the dark. Zhou Dingyun had yet to react, and he could feel a cool touch to his neck. It was prickly, and there was a cold voice next to his ears. "Move and I'll kill you!" Zhou Dingyun felt a chill on his back. He had goosebumps all over his body. He might be physically strong, but Zhou Dingyun was unable to exert any strength. He knew very well that the thing that was on his neck was a sharp weapon, which could easily pierce through his throat. Who are you?" Zhou Dingyun panicked, feeling as if his throat had been punctured, and warm liquid flowed down from his neck to his chest. The feeling was terrifying. It was as if his life was draining bit by bit, but there was nothing he could do. All of a sudden, someone pulled Zhou Dingyun's hair by force and jerked him to the back. There was a tearing pain in his scalp. It felt as if it was close to being torn off from his head. "Ah!" Zhou Dingyun screamed in pain. Zhou Dingyun's legs went limp and he fell to his knees at the severe pain and life-threatening knife at his neck. Zhou Dingyun never felt so close to death. "Take a look at who I am." The person behind him spoke up again. It was cold and eerie, as if the person was a ghost from hell, seeking his life. Zhou Dingyun threw his head back in an odd posture, widening his eyes to look upward. One glance at the person, and Zhou Dingyun was terror-stricken. In the dark, Su Zimo did not have the scholarly aura of a scholar. His expression was grim and menacing. His eyes were sharp and scary. The expression in his eyes was colder than the sharp knife in his hands. At this moment, Zhou Dingyun could sense Su Zimo's determination and strong intention to kill. Oh no! Now that Su Zimo had lost his scholarly honors and been reduced to an inferior commoner, he is serious about killing me. No, I am joining the Immortal sect. I can't die! Thousands of thoughts fleeted through Zhou Dingyun's mind in that split second. They all morphed into a strong desire to survive. Zhou Dingyun quivered. Why you can't kill me? If others know about it, why you can't escape death? Hee hee. Su Zimo smiled. My life is worthless. I want to get someone to die with me. You are really down on your luck to come looking for me. You mustn't blame me. To Zhou Dingyun, Su Zimo's smile in the dark seemed particularly eerie. Zhou Dingyun felt even more fear at his calm and indifferent tone. Crazy! Su Zimo is crazy! He had barely shouted when Zhou Dingyun felt the slight movement of the sharp knife at his throat. Zhou Dingyun had a mental breakdown at the pulsating pain at his throat. As second young Master Su, I beg you to spare my cheap life. I will never do evil in the future. Second young Master Su, I swear that even if I am lucky enough to join the Immortal sect, I will never seek revenge on you. If not, I will suffer a painful death where countless of arrows pierce through my heart. Su Zimo was silent. He squinted his eyes and looked at Zhou Dingyun. Zhou Dingyun panicked further at the dead silence. Zhou Dingyun could not tell what was on Su Zimo's mind. Time trickled by. Just when Zhou Dingyun was close to despair, the grip on his scalp was loosened and the sharp knife on his neck was being removed slowly. Scram! Su Zimo said coldly. To Zhou Dingyun, the words sounded like an immortal's voice. He felt as if he was being pardoned. He crawled and rolled, fleeing from the room. Zhou Dingyun covered the wound on his neck with his hand and ran to the courtyard, panting heavily. After the narrow escape from death, Zhou Dingyun gritted his teeth and had a malicious thought again. Su Zimo is after all a scholar. Previously he was prepared, but right now, he won't have chances of survival. There was a murderous look in Zhou Dingyun's eyes. He could not help but turn to look toward the room. Su Zimo stood at the doorway. He was clad in green clothes, with a sharp knife that had a 1-foot-long handle in his right hand. His eyes were cold, he looked like a tiger that was capable of devouring humans. There was a murderous aura about him. There was a sense of ridicule in his expression, he seemed to have seen through Zhou Dingyun. Zhou Dingyun's evil thought vanished instantly. Zhou Dingyun had no idea about how deep the wound on his neck was, and he was clueless about whether Su Zimo had any other tricks up his sleeves. No matter what, he would not take the risk again. Revenge is a dish best served cold. With that, Zhou Dingyun fled the mansion hurriedly. Chapter 3 Supreme Demon Classic. Chapter 3 Supreme Demon Classic. Su Zimo waited till Zhou Dingyun had long left before he let out a long breath, his face looking pale. The encounter was brief but dangerous. But luckily it was as what he had predicted. Su Zimo took note of a piece of information during the conversation with Shen Mingqi. She and Zhou Dingyun would leave Pingyang town with perfected Song Lang tomorrow. Su Zimo expected that Zhou Dingyun would definitely seek revenge tonight. Su Zimo had thought of seeking help from the Su family. But in this way, other than implicating the Su family, it would not change the outcome in any way. This was because Zhou Dingyun could not be killed. He was no longer the ruffian he used to be. Instead, he was about to join the Immortal sect. If he died, perfected Song Lang would definitely come looking for him. By then, who would be able to stop him? Su Zimo had never killed anyone before. But when the knife touched Zhou Dingyun's throat, he was not the least nervous, scared, or frightened. Instead, he was slightly excited and eager to try. He did not give a damn as to what would happen tomorrow. The sky might collapse or the ground might sink. He would be able to relieve his pent-up frustrations if he killed the bully. That would be so cool. Su Zimo indeed had the murderous intent and aura. He did not disguise it. He almost could not control himself, and wanted to stab him with a knife. This was the first time that Su Zimo discovered that the blood that flowed inside of him was not the scholarly blood, but more of a general in the battlefield that was used to killing, or of those brutes who believed in an eye for an eye. He might used to have scholarly honors, but he was unable to stop the evildoers. Instead, it was his sharp knife that sent them away. Long years of hard study could not be compared to the sharpness of the knife. Su Zimo laughed at himself. A scholar is indeed useless. He could only do this much. Su Zimo returned to the room. He threw the knife aside, lying on the bed, but he did not sleep at all. He was worried about one thing. Given Zhou Dingyun's temperament, he would definitely return to Pingyang town after cultivation and seek revenge for what happened today. He would meet his end then. It might be a month later, or perhaps a year later or 10 years later. Nevertheless, Zhou Dingyun would definitely come back. Su Zimo knew it very well, but he had to tolerate the wicked acts of him today. That was because if he killed Zhou Dingyun, he would definitely die tomorrow. However, if he let Zhou Dingyun off, at least there was still a glimmer of hope. The glimmer of hope was that he would be able to gain the ability to fight against him before Zhou Dingyun came back after completing his cultivation. But was that possible? What was a spirit root? Why did he not have a spirit root? Why could he not cultivate without a spirit root? Why? Su Zimo felt confused. He was curious about the Immortal sect and was bewildered about the future. Su Zimo's eyelids felt heavy, and he drifted off to sleep. Su Zimo had a weird dream. In the dream, an immortal whispered into his ears. "Do you want to cultivate?" Yes, Su Zimo would love to do that. Never before had he felt so eager to have power. Su Zimo felt that something was odd. Su Zimo was startled awake shortly after. He sat up suddenly. There was uncertainty in his eyes, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. He finally realized what was wrong. This was not a dream. Someone was really asking whether he wanted to cultivate. Su Zimo got up and opened the door, witnessing a scene that he would never forget in his entire life. There was an exquisite beauty next to the peach blossom tree in the courtyard. She was clad in a blood-red robe. She stood there with sparkling eyes, watching him quietly. The clouds seemed to have dispersed, and the moonlight was clear as water. The petals of the peach blossoms fell off the tree, and the lady was standing in the midst of it. It seemed as if there were mist and clouds in the twilight. This did not look like the mortal world. "Do you want to cultivate?" Dayu asked once again. Her voice was gentle and pleasant, seeming somewhat lazy. Su Zimo took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. He had lots of questions and doubts, but he only managed to utter a single word. Yes. Well, I'll teach you. Daiyu replied casually. It was as if teaching Su Zimo was a simple chore like eating or dressing. Su Zimo walked down the stone steps and stopped in front of Daiyu. He gazed into her clear, watery eyes. Daiyu was gazing at him as well. After a while, Su Zimo realized that the lady in front of him was like a mystery. He could not see through her at all. On the contrary, Su Zimo felt as if he was seen through by Daiyu, and he could not hide any secrets from her. For a moment, Su Zimo had a flickering thought that Daiyu knew everything that happened to him today. She knew everything that he was thinking about. I have no spirit root. Su Zimo took a while before he said. There is a cultivation technique that does not require spirit root. What cultivation technique is that? Su Zimo asked automatically. The cultivation technique of the demon clan. Daiyu widened her eyes and there was a special aura about her. Su Zimo's countenance changed and he could not help but retreat half a step. Even though he knew nothing about cultivation, Su Zimo knew that human beings and demons belonged to different paths. According to legends, there were many cases where fiendish demons harmed human beings. Did he want to cultivate the cultivation technique of the demon clan and to become a fiendish demon who was bent on killing? It did not take long for Su Zimo to make up his mind. I'll learn. Su Zimo did not know what he would become in the future, but he knew that if he did not make use of this opportunity, soon afterwards, when Zhou Dingyun returned, he would certainly die, not to mention what would happen in the future. Daiyu was not surprised at all. It seemed she had expected Su Zimo would say yes. She continued on. If you want to learn the cultivation technique of the demon clan, you have to agree to 2 conditions. Firstly, don't ask me about my identity or background. I will teach and you will learn. Secondly, you must not tell others of this cultivation technique. Okay. Su Zimo nodded. Daiyu continued on. One more thing, if you want to learn this cultivation technique, you will experience unimaginable dangers. You may lose your life at any time. Do not expect me to save you. Su Zimo smiled faintly. Life and death are preordained. If there are any questions, you can go ahead and ask. Daiyu smiled lightly. This was the first time in 2 years that Su Zimo saw a smile on Daiyu's face. He marveled at her smile and seemed to be lost in it. But Su Zimo cleared his thoughts in the blink of an eye and asked in a low voice. What is the spirit root? What is cultivation? Why did Perfected Sung Lang say that I can't cultivate without spirit root? Cultivation can also be called cultivation or cultivation of Tao. There are 3 oldest major schools of cultivation of the humans clan: Immortal, Buddha, Fiend. The so-called spirit root is the Immortal sect's way of calling it. For Buddhism, they called it as the root of wisdom, while the Fiend sect called it as Fiend's seed. It is basically the same. As humans, if one doesn't have spirit root, one cannot join any of the sections. Su Zimo understood her words. What Daiyu meant was that demon cultivation did not need the spirit root. Daiyu continued. Humans have 5 senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and the spirit root is equivalent to the 6th sense. It is the key to sense the aura between heaven and earth. Su Zimo suddenly saw the light. Without the spirit root, one could not see the aura of heaven and earth and one could not cultivate. Su Zimo continued to ask, are there different realms to cultivation? Which level of cultivators does Perfected Sang Lang belong to? The Immortal sect can be divided into Qi Condensation Realm, Foundation Establishment Realm, Golden Core Realm, Nascent Soul Realm. He is a Golden Core Realm cultivator. There are different realms to Demon cultivation, Immortal cultivation, Fiend cultivation and Buddha cultivation. It is just different means of achieving the same end. But no matter what, the path of Golden Core is the natural chasm that everyone has to pass through. There are many cultivators, but half of them would be stuck at the path of Golden Core, with no hope of success. Cultivation is to be in defiance of the natural order, and to seize the good aura of heaven and earth. Once one entered the path of Golden Core, it means that one breaks the shackles of heaven and earth for the first time. One's lifespan could increase to 500 years. There is the saying that once one swallows an elixir, one's lifespan will not be decided by nature. Dai Yu continued. The cultivation technique that you are going to learn is divided into 9 sections. The first section is body tempering, the second section is tendons transformation, the third section is bones strengthening, the fourth section is marrow cleansing, the fifth section is organs refinement, the sixth section is orifice clearing, the seventh section is core formation. If you want to take revenge, you must cultivate to the 7th section. What is the name of this cultivation technique? Su Zimo asked. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Su Zimo was shocked. He could feel a strong, menacing aura surging toward him at the mention of the title. It was suffocating. Body tempering, the first section of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, can be divided into 2 parts, to harden and refine the skin and flesh. There are different breathing and expiration methods, techniques and moves that correspond to it. There was a demonic glitter in Dai Yu's eyes. Thereafter, there were several lengthy and profound incantations in Su Zimo's mind. There were no mountain of immortals or clear waters, grotto heaven paradise, or bejeweled jade palace. Su Zimo had started on the path to cultivation right in the inconspicuous courtyard, under the peach blossom tree that was in full bloom. It seemed to be casual and coincidental, but it also felt as if everything was predestined. Not long after, Su Zimo's inspiration gradually became different under Dai Yu's guidance. This did not seem like the breathing method of normal humans. After being repeatedly corrected and going through countless practices, Su Zimo gradually seemed to get the hang of it. With this breathing and expiration, his body felt warm and his blood and flesh seemed to be burning and boiling, turning into boundless energy, bubbling to the surface of his skin. Su Zimo felt an itch in his skin. This skin-tempering breathing method originates from the wild bovine demon king. One can practice when on the go or when sitting or sleeping. There is no definite posture to it. The bovine is resilient and has tough skin. Knife or sword will not be able to penetrate it. Take your time to appreciate it. Seeing that Su Zimo's breathing was gradually on the right track, Dai Yu turned to go back to her room, not disturbing him. Su Zimo had long been immersed in this wonderful breathing and expiration method. He could feel that his skin had become tougher, stronger and more powerful with every breathing cycle. The night faded. Su Zimo had lost track of time. He even forgot where he was. He was focused on comprehending the incantations, and his breathing and expiration. The first ray of sunshine lit up part of the sky. Su Zimo was stunned to realize that something hard and strong seemed to be sticking out of his head, facing the sky. There were 2 of them. At this moment, Su Zimo seemed to have turned into an unrivaled bovine demon, taking in and breathing out the entire heaven and earth. Dai Yu, who was meditating in the room, jolted. Her gaze pierced right through the walls to land on Su Zimo. He actually understood the essence of it within such a short time? Oh, he is indeed a genius meant for demon cultivation. I have not wasted my efforts in giving him such a chance. There was a look of praise in her eyes. Although she did not make a single movement, strangely, she had ended up at the courtyard and appeared before Su Zimo. Bang! Su Zimo, who was immersed in cultivation, was hit by an external force all of a sudden. He flew to a small distance away and stopped his breathing and expiration exercise. Su Zimo got up from the ground, feeling slightly dizzy. He looked around, but there was no one in the courtyard. Su Zimo frowned as he saw Dai Yu, who stood in the distance. Are you courting death? Dai Yu hid the look of praise in her eyes, and instead spoke in a cold tone. What? Su Zimo was dazed. Dai Yu waved the sleeves of her robe and a sparkling water mirror emerged out of nowhere to appear in front of Su Zimo. Su Zimo looked dumbstruck. This was far beyond his imagination. When Su Zimo saw his own reflection in the water mirror, his surprise turned into panic. How could this be? Su Zimo was originally on the thin side. But his reflection in the water mirror was far thinner than his original build. He seemed to be emaciated. If not for the familiar facial features and the contours of the cheek, Su Zimo could not believe that the person in the water mirror was himself. No matter what kind of practice, the power will not appear out of thin air. Cultivators from the Immortal, Buddha and Fiend sects take in the aura of the heaven and earth into their bodies, while those stronger demons clan will use the essence of the sun and the moon to harden the body. You have yet to attain that realm. Therefore, whenever you breathe in and out, you are using the essence of your own blood and flesh. If this goes on, you will die in 3 days. What then? Su Zimo was startled. You will naturally have to devour flesh and blood to supplement your energy before you continue with your cultivation. At the mention of eating, Su Zimo's stomach began to growl. He felt severe pangs of hunger that almost drove him crazy. Su Zimo dashed straight to the kitchen in lightning speed. In less than a quarter of an hour, he made a clean sweep of everything edible in the kitchen and gobbled them down his stomach before he slightly eased his hunger. Su Zimo only discovered until now that he did not sleep all night. Not only did he not feel tired, instead he was energetic and full of strength. Su Zimo picked up the thin iron basin next to him and squeezed it. To his surprise, there were a few clear fingerprints on the iron basin. Psst! That powerful? Su Zimo was secretly amazed at himself. He underwent a huge change with a single night of cultivation. Su Zimo was full of confidence in the days to come. I suppose even if Zhou Dingyan comes back from the Immortal sect, I will have the capability to spar with him. At this time, Su Zimo still did not know the scariness of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. This cultivation technique was the supreme demon classic that disrupted the balance of yin and yang, seizing the good aura of heaven and earth, changing the universe and turning the vital energy. This was something that did not belong to this world. Chapter 4 Try Bovine Style. Chapter 4 Try Bovine Style. On the second day, Su Zimo went to the market early in the morning to buy a few cattle as his food supply for the next few days. After putting them aside, Su Zimo went to Dai Yu's room, knocking on the door. Miss Dai? To Su Zimo's surprise, the door slowly opened at his knocking. Although the sky was bright, the room was strangely pitch dark. Come in. Dai Yu's voice could be heard coming from the room. Su Zimo took a deep breath and stepped into the room. Su Zimo could not help but feel odd. He seemed to have passed a soft and cold water curtain into another world. Su Zimo took a look and was startled. The sight in front of him was no longer Dai Yu's room. Instead, it was much more spacious than his mansion. He stood on a green lawn and there was a wooden barrel that was slightly more than half as high as normal humans. Dai Yu sat slanted on a huge green stone, lazing around. Although she had a large blood-red robe around her, it could not hide her slim and exquisite figure. This is... Su Zimo opened his mouth slightly. Dai Yu had shown him a lot of incomprehensible prowess within a day. To him, it was strange and fascinating. This is to insert the largest thing into the smallest one. You will understand when you reach a certain realm. There is no need to think too much about it right now. Dai Yu replied, leaving no room for doubt. This is the cultivation field that I have created. You will cultivate here in the future. Dai Yu jumped down lightly from the green stone. I will teach you 3 more styles. These are called the Try Bovine style. Practice it in conjunction with the breathing and expiration method. The first style is Plow Heaven Stride. Although there is only one style, it is ever-changing. It is the only way to cultivate one's leg strength. While talking, Dai Yu walked on the grass. Su Zimo widened his eyes and concentrated on what she was doing, staring at every step and movement of Dai Yu, for fear that he would miss the details. After a few steps, Su Zimo vaguely grasped what Dai Yu was talking about. There did not seem to be anything fascinating about her steps. But if he observed carefully, he discovered that Dai Yu seemed to be making her way through muddy water. She drew in her chest slightly and erected the back, bending her knees and lowered her center of gravity. She never let her knees bend past her toes, but her strides were very wide. She seemed to have calculated the distance between each step. It was exactly the same. Dai Yu stopped in her tracks, and turned to look at Suzumo. Your turn. Suzumo was not in a hurry to practice. Instead, he stood in place for a long time to ponder before he took the first step. Suzumo had just taken the first step and he sensed that he had made a mistake. Daiyu came to Suzumo's side without any expression. She extended her leg and gave a slight kick at Suzumo's extended leg. Pissed! Suzumo gasped. Daiyu's kick sent unbearable piercing pain down his thigh. He felt as if someone poked his legs mercilessly with needles. Hold this position, continue. Daiyu's indifferent voice could be heard in the room. Suzumo lowered his head and realized that after being kicked by Daiyu, the extended leg had a higher resemblance to Plow Heaven's stride. She is helping to correct me. Suzumo understood Daiyu's intentions. Suzumo pursed his lips and tried to recall the stance of Plow Heaven's stride, making another stride with his left leg. Wrong! The sole of the foot had just touched the ground and Daiyu's voice could be heard again, followed by a piercing pain on Suzumo's left leg. Suzumo automatically corrected his stances under the stimulation of the pain in his leg. Suzumo took a breather before taking another stride with his right leg. Wrong! He could feel the familiar sting again. Wrong! Stinging pain! He continued to practice and was being corrected over and over again. In the end, Suzumo could not even feel his legs. It was numb from Daiyu's constant kicks. Suzumo clenched his teeth, drenched in perspiration. His only thought was that he had to keep walking. Time passed by without him knowing. Finally, he no longer heard the word, wrong, being hollered at him. It sounded like a nightmare to him. Suzumo also realized that he had begun to understand the crux of Plow Heaven's stride. Don't you remember what I taught you last night? Suzumo suddenly saw the light with Daiyu's reminder. He began to use the breathing and expiration method that he learned yesterday night as he practiced Plow Heaven's stride. At the beginning, Suzumo could not apply both of them together. He could not breathe properly after making a stride. But with the passage of time, Suzumo gradually found a way to use the breathing method together with the Plow Heaven's stride. In fact, this breathing method coexisted with the Plow Heaven's stride. Suzumo went faster and faster, and he no longer felt numbness in his legs. His flesh and blood seemed to be burning, and he had infinite strength in his legs. His strides became wider as well. He did not make any movement, but he was able to move 5 feet wide in a stride. Suzumo was thrilled to know that he was learning it correctly. But Suzumo could vaguely feel that his Plow Heaven's stride seemed to be lacking something. Suzumo automatically looked toward Daiyu, who sat slanted on the green stone. Daiyu had a look of disdain on her face, her eyes cynical and morose. Suzumo thought to himself, I am very skilled at using the breathing and expiration method with Plow Heaven's stride. Why does she still look down on me? Suzumo felt angry, hence he deliberately practiced the Plow Heaven's stride, circling the green stone, moving about in front of Daiyu. Daiyu sneered after a short while. Do you intend to train yourself to become an ox? This stride is meant to plow the heaven, it is not for you to plow the land. Suzumo was startled. He stopped in his tracks. Daiyu floated down the green stone and went outside. She said coldly, When you can understand the profound meaning of Plow Heaven, you will then be able to master the essence of this set of footwork. Suzumo finally realized what was missing in his Plow Heaven stride. His every stride was supposed to plow a ravine out of the heaven. How much boldness and vigor would one need to do that? Although he was skilled in this footwork, he lacked the vigor and boldness. Therefore, he could only be reduced to the cattle that plowed the land. Plow Heaven, Plow Heaven! Suzumo kept pondering over it, and he gradually saw the light. Daiyu walked out of the room to the courtyard, with a faint smile on her face. Gone was the harsh and cold attitude that she displayed in front of Suzumo. He could achieve this with 1 day and 1 night of cultivation. He seems to be slightly better than me back then. The lady's whispers could be faintly heard under the peach blossom tree. But it was gone with the breeze. For a month, Suzumo spent most of his time practicing Plow Heaven's stride in the cultivation field. He worked hard in grasping the essence of plow heaven, and had a deeper understanding of the footwork. During this period, Su Zimo occasionally went out to buy some cattle and sheep, and he vaguely heard some news. Success was a relative term. It brought so many relatives. The Shen family in Pingyang Town used to be an ordinary family. But many pugilistic experts worked for the Shen family during this period of time. In the eyes of all, it was inevitable that the Shen family would rise to success. As long as Shimingchi succeeded in her cultivation, even if she made a one-time visit to her family, it was enough to bring success to the Shen family for generations. The pugilistic experts might even have the chance to join the Immortal sect. They would not mind even if it was as their servants. On the contrary, the Su family had been in constant trouble lately. There were originally 3 large families, namely the Zhao family, the Li family, and the Yang family in Pingyang Town. Su family rose to success in recent years. Furthermore, Su Hong was a Connate expert, and Su Zimo had scholarly honors. Therefore, the 4 families had been living in harmony. And now, Su Zimo's scholarly honors had been written off, and he had been reduced to an inferior commoner. He also offended an immortal. The 3 families got restless and could not wait to take over the Su family's business in Pingyang Town, and there had been several conflicts and clashes between them. However, Su Zimo did not take these to heart. There was Uncle Jing to take charge in the Su family, as well as Lu Yu and other postnatal experts to help out. The most important thing was that his older brother was not at Pingyang Town now. When he was back, given his swift and harsh style, he would be able to suppress those evildoers. This day, Dai Yu came up to Su Zimo and said, "I will teach you the other 2 styles. Afterward, you can practice the 3 styles together." Dai Yu paused for a while before continuing. "Most of the styles in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness are killing techniques. The next 2 styles are meant for killing. Bear that in mind. First style, Bovine's moon gazing." Dai Yu took a step forward. That was the stance of plow heaven stride. She then leaned forward, her arms suddenly outstretched from the abdomen. She clenched her fists, with her index finger slightly raised. She dabbed her finger and shifted slightly upward. At this moment, Dai Yu seemed to have disappeared right in front of Su Zimo. In replacement was a domineering bovine demon with its horns upraised. Dai Yu's arms were the horns. The clenched fists with the raised joint of her index finger was the pointed part of the horn. Plow heaven stride is the foundation for Bovine's moon gazing. Get into the plow heaven stride stance, and exert force at the waist and abdomen. In the meantime, throw out your fists. You must be able to charge toward the top as well as to do an upward thrust. Dai Yu explained in detail, while Su Zimo listened attentively. Even so, when Su Zimo really practiced it, it was still inevitable that he suffered kicks from making mistakes. Dai Yu stood by the side with a cold face. She would give him a kick whenever there was the slightest mistake. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Su Zimo was starving. He rushed to slaughter a cow. He prepared a wok and began to boil a pot of delicious beef. While waiting, Dai Yu picked up the cow tongue that Su Zimo threw aside, saying, "Take the knife to stab at me." "Ah?" Su Zimo was startled. He did not understand Dai Yu's intention. Dai Yu replied, "I will teach you the 3rd style. There is no way to show you how to do it. You will have to appreciate and understand the moment of change by yourself." Su Zimo knew that given Dai Yu's abilities, even if he exerted all his force, he would not hurt her. Su Zimo gripped the knife and made a stab toward Dai Yu's shoulder, while concentrating on watching her movements. Dai Yu looked aloof. She raised the smooth and tender cow tongue and tapped it gently on the knife. "Pa!" There was a brittle sound, leaving Su Zimo gaping in shock. The cow tongue was intact, while Su Zimo was only left with the handle of the knife in his hands. The blade had shattered into pieces onto the ground. Su Zimo slaughtered the cow by himself. He knew that the cow tongue was just an ordinary tongue. It could never withstand the blow from the sharp knife. Moreover, Su Zimo could not tell that Dai Yu had exerted any force just now. Otherwise, he would not be holding on to the handle. It would have flown out of his hands. This was just an ordinary cow tongue, but it shattered the sharp knife into pieces. If the cow tongue tapped on a man instead of a knife, would the person turn into powder? The third style is called Bovine Tongue Saber. It may sound ordinary, but it represents the essence of this style. Dai Yu continued. You once asked me when would you know that you have made initial success at cultivating skin tempering? Let me tell you now. When your palm has the same force as this cow tongue, you will be considered as having initial success at it. Chapter 5 Su Family's Misfortune. Chapter 5 Su Family's Misfortune. Su Zimo often heard from other people that time passed by very fast when one cultivated. After he started cultivation, he finally realized what it meant. To his surprise, Su Zimo had spent 3 months in the cultivation field, and his body had undergone a total transformation. Others might not sense the change in Su Zimo, but he knew it very well. During this time, he was already skilled in using the two styles, Plow Heaven's Stride and Bovine's Moon Gazing. Coupled with the breathing and expiration method, Su Zimo's skin had toughened and was impenetrable to ordinary swords and knives. He felt immense strength in his every movement. The only thing that Su Zimo was distressed about was the bovine tongue saber. He could not get the gist of it. At the cultivation field, Su Zimo took a deep breath, drew in his chest slightly and straightened his back. He took a step forward with his left foot, getting into the stance of Plow Heaven's Stride. Originally, when Su Zimo stood there without moving, he looked like a frail scholar. But when he took a step forward, there was a drastic change in his aura. It was as if he had the whole sky under his foot. At the same time, Su Zimo exerted force at his waist and abdomen, punching his fists forward, pointing and thrusting upward. He seemed to let out a mooing sound similar to bovines. It was deep and powerful, startling other people. When executing Plow Heaven's Stride and Bovine's Moon Gazing, it was natural and unforced. Coupled with the breathing and expiration method, it made them even more powerful. Dai Yu, who sat on the green stone, saw this scene and nodded secretly. After executing Bovine's Moon Gazing, Su Zimo continued by opening his fists and giving a harsh slap. The third style, Bovine Tongue Saber. Pa! The palm made a loud cracking sound in the air. Su Zimo sighed, shaking his head. There was still something off about it. The palm looked strong, but he was unable to execute the flexibility of Bovine Tongue Saber. Dai Yu shifted her gaze elsewhere. It had only been 3 months, but Su Zimo was able to achieve this level. It had already exceeded her expectations. Bovine Tongue Saber was the most difficult and most powerful style among the tri-bovine style. It was useless to keep practicing. One would never comprehend the essence of it. One needed to have the power of understanding in order to grasp its essence. Otherwise, notwithstanding 3 months, one might not be able to succeed for 3 years or 30 years. Su Zimo felt frustrated after constantly failing at this style. He left the cultivation field and took a stroll in the courtyard, looking around. Inadvertently, Su Zimo's gaze fell on the cow that was chewing on the grass not far away, and he stopped suddenly. It was the most common cow in the market. It was used by the farmers to plow the fields. It chewed the grass in its mouth and swallowed them into its belly. It then lowered its head, sticking out its tongue to sweep over a handful of tender grass, rolled them about and took them into its mouth. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he suddenly saw the light. The tender grasses were the most common couch grass. Its leaves were thin and slender, and they had serrated edges. When Su Zimo was a child, he was scratched by the leaves accidentally. The cow tongue was so tender, but it had no fear of these couch grasses. The palm was the cow tongue, while the blade was the couch grass. This was the essence of Bovine Tongue Saber. Su Zimo was exhilarated. The scene where the cow ate the grasses kept coming up in his mind. He tried to comprehend the changes in that instant and thought it over and over in his mind, and began to practice automatically. I heard that the Su family had suffered a misfortune. It was said that the Su family's restaurant was being smashed. I don't think it can open for business. I heard that someone died as well. Is it that serious? Su Zimo heard murmurs coming from outside the mansion, and he was startled from his cultivation. Su Zimo sobered up from his cultivation and his heart sank at the rumors. He pushed open the door and dashed to Su family's residence. Su Zimo overheard the discussion of others along the way, and roughly knew what was the cause of the misfortune this time. Several people picked quarrels and started trouble in the Su family's restaurant. They smashed the furniture, and Uncle Jing brought people with him to the restaurant. However, those people turned out to be postnatal perfected experts. They came prepared and Uncle Jing was injured instead. Damn, I can't take this lying down! Su Zimo had just arrived and he heard angry shouts coming from the house. He was Yuchihua. He was one of the guards at Su family, and he had a fiery temper. Everyone in the house was Su Zimo's trusted men. Su Zimo lost his parents when he was 2 years old. Uncle Jing and others had been with the Su family for the longest time, and they were very fond of him. In the beginning, it was these few people who helped his older brother to gain a foothold in Pingyang town. The brothers had a close relationship with these uncles. A strong smell of medicine wafted toward him, and there was also a faint smell of blood. Second young master is back. Although he had lost his scholarly honors, everyone in Su family were very respectful toward Su Zimo. Su Zimo nodded and went to check on the elder that laid on his sides on the bed. Second young master. The old man's hair was white and his face was gaunt and yellow. He seemed to have one foot in the grave. Despite that, he still smiled at seeing Su Zimo. There was a tenderness in the way he looked at Su Zimo. Uncle Jing was in charge of managing the Su household. Although he did not know martial arts, everyone in the Su family, including Su Hong, showed respect toward him. Uncle Jing had become thin and was getting on in years. Now that he was injured, it was still unknown whether he could survive or not. Uncle Jing, who is the other party? Although Su Zimo was boiling in anger, he appeared very calm, speaking softly at the bedside. Who else could it be? It must be the grandchildren of the 3 families, Zhao family, Li family and Yang family. Yuchi was shouted in anger. It's not that simple. The man who spoke up was over 40 years old. He looked calm and composed. He was the leader of the Su family guards. Uncle Lu, what do you mean? Su Zimo asked. Lu Yu looked at Su Zimo, swallowing back the words on the tip of his tongue. Yuchihua could not contain his anger. He hollered. Lu Yu, why are you being wishy-washy? Don't you know the seriousness of the situation? Mr. Jing was wounded by them, and old Guan had suffered a terrible death. If those young lads under you were not smart, and broke out of the siege, Mr. Jing would have died. Those people wanted us dead. Uncle Guan is dead? Su Zimo's heart ached at the news. When he was a child, Su Zimo often rode on Uncle Guan's shoulder, grabbing and clutching his hair. But no matter how much Su Zimo fooled around, Uncle Guan would never get angry at him. He would laugh it off and play with him. Su Zimo spoke through gritted teeth. Won't the authorities step in? The authorities will be in charge of the affairs of the civilians. This is the conflict between several family clans. They would try all means to avoid it. Besides, whatever that is in the pugilistic society will be settled in the pugilistic way. Lu Yu shook his head. Su Zimo's voice sank. Uncle Lu, what is going on? Lu Yu gave a slight sigh. My guards followed those people and saw them entering Shin family's residence. The people from Shin family are such ungrateful scumbags. Yuchi smashed the table next to him with his fist, breathing angrily. Due to the relationship between Su Zimo and Shin Mingqi, the Su family rendered a lot of help to Shin family these past few years. Now that Shin Mingqi joined the Immortal sect and skyrocketed to a top position, the Shin family turned to target the Su family. Lu Yu continued. I have done some investigations. The Shin family has been preparing to open a restaurant these days. Our restaurant is in their way. Su Zimo was expressionless as he listened to Lu Yu's analysis quietly. Ahem! Uncle Zheng coughed, panting slightly. Although the Shin family is the one who started it, the 3 families might have been adding momentum to it. This is the end of the matter. We shall wait until the young master is back. Do we just put up with it? Yuchihua gritted his teeth. Lu Yu sighed. Let's endure it for now. The fact that the Shin family has risen through the ranks within such a short period of time, I suspect that Connate experts might be working with them. If we go to them without any plan, we might suffer even more casualties. When will young master return? I don't know, but I guess he will be back soon. Su Zimo suddenly said. Uncle Jing, have a good rest, I will go out to take a breather. That said, Su Zimo turned and left. 3 months ago, Su Zimo's scholarly honors were written off and Shen Mingqi left the town. Zhui Feng was also dead. Su Zimo had been suppressing his anger and frustration at all that had happened. That was why he almost gave in to his urge to kill the ruffian with one stab that night. During this time, under Dai Yu's guidance, Su Zimo had been working hard on his cultivation. But in fact, he had never forgotten his grievances and he still could not take it lying down. Now that the Su family suffered this misfortune, Uncle Jing was seriously injured and Uncle Guan died a terrible death. All these events further sparked the anger in Su Zimo's heart. Su Zimo left the Su family's residence. This was his only thought in mind. Those people had gone too far in bullying them. Su Zimo had some vague idea of the differences between Connate and postnatal in the pugilistic society. Postnatal and Connate were divided into early stage, mid-stage, late stage and perfected. His older brother, Su Hong, was an early-stage Connate expert. Su Zimo had no idea which stage he belonged to. He was clueless as to which expert and from which stage could he handle. In Su Zimo's opinion, he had only cultivated for 3 months, he would not be able to defeat others who had cultivated for more than 10 years. Despite that, Su Zimo had to demand an explanation from the Shin family. After all, he had spent more than 10 years studying. He believed that everything must be based on reasons. The Shin family had to give him an explanation. Shortly after, Su Zimo reached the Shin family's residence. In just 3 months, the Shin family had undergone tremendous changes, changing from an ordinary family to the prestigious Shin family now. On the 2 sides of the vermilion-red door stood 2 majestic stone lions. If Su Zimo did not remember its location by heart, he would never believe that this was Shen Mingqi's house. Su Zimo walked up the stairs. He did not bother to knock, but pushed the door open. At this moment, many people were gathered at Shen family's residence. They were happily drinking, laughing and chatting with each other. Now that Su Zimo suddenly barged into the residence, the crowd in the courtyard slowly dispersed. Many of them stopped whatever they were doing, staring at Su Zimo with a grim expression on their faces. These people seemed wild and uncultivated, looking ferocious. Their cold and flashing weapons were placed by the side. One of them had sharp eyes and recognized Su Zimo, speaking in a peculiar tone. Oh, isn't this second young Master Su, the successful candidate in the Imperial Provincial Examination in country of Deqi? Why do you have the time to grace Shen family's residence? Haha, you must not have known. Second young Master Su's scholarly honors had been written off. Right now, he is a big idler. The ruffians of the pugilistic society ridiculed Su Zimo one after another. They stared at him with obvious evil intentions, and they hit their weapons against each other to send sparks flying, creating the piercing sounds of metal clashing against each other. If he was just an ordinary scholar, he would have gone limp in his legs at the current situation, where he was surrounded by menacing ruffians. However, Su Zimo maintained the same expression, and he even moved to stand in the center of the courtyard. Back then, when Su Zimo had yet to start cultivating, he was brave enough to confront perfected Song Lang at the unjust treatment. Right now, the ruffians in front of him were worlds apart from perfected golden core. They did not exude the same vigor and aura like him. There was no way that he would be scared of them. Su Zimo maintained a calm expression while his eyes swept across the courtyard, speaking calmly. I want to see Shannan. Shannan was Shen Mingqi's older brother. He, second young Master Su, came uninvited. Please pardon me for not welcoming you. The voice was heard first before seeing the person himself. Su Zimo turned his gaze to the direction where the sound was coming from. A man in a white robe slowly walked over from the long corridor of the courtyard. He was all smiles, but he did not make any effort to conceal the mockery in his eyes. Chapter 6 Murder. Chapter 6 Murder. Shin-nan wore a white brocade robe, with a jade hanging at the waist. He seemed like a rich man's son. But everyone in Pingyang town knew of his background. Shin-nan used to be the manager of the Su family's restaurant. He was given the job on account of Su Zimo. Shin-nan took a cup of wine next to him and walked up to stand in front of Su Zimo, passing the cup of wine to him, putting on a fake smile. "Welcome, second young Master Su. No matter what, I have to serve you wine. Please accept it. Regarding what happened today, whose idea was it?" Su Zimo ignored him but asked him softly. Shin-nan maintained the smile on his face, leaning his head to the side, pretending not to know. "I don't understand what second young Master Su is talking about. Shin-nan, I want an explanation. Who is the murderer?" Su Zimo stared at Shin-nan's eyes, but his tone remained very calm. Shin-nan raised his eyebrow, putting away his smile. He looked upward and finished the cup of wine as he said lightly, "It seems that second young Master Su wants to make things difficult." With that, Shin-nan threw the cup in his hand onto the ground, smashing it into pieces. All the ruffians in the courtyard stood up at the sound, unsheathing their weapons from their scabbards. All of them looked menacing and eager to fight. "Damn, I can no longer stand this guy. Did he really think that he is a young master? He is merely an inferior class commoner. We gave him a way out but he refused. I am Mo Song. I am the one who slaughtered the man by the surname of Guan. There's me as well. It's a pity that the old man did not die under my palm." Su Zimo swept his gaze over everyone who spoke up. He nodded and said, "Very well, very well." Shin-nan sneered. "Su Zimo, don't seek trouble for yourself. Today I will take into account your relationship with my sister and let..." Scram! Shin-nan was not finished, but he was interrupted by Su Zimo's holler. Everyone in the courtyard found it weird and unbelievable. Shin-nan looked ferocious as he said coldly, "How dare you scold me?" Su Zimo glared at him. Shin-nan was taken aback by his sharp gaze. He had yet to recover and Su Zimo made his move. Su Zimo did not make any other movement. He stretched his palms and slapped Shin-nan on the face. "Pa!" After being slapped by Su Zimo, Shin-nan was sent 10 feet away under the watchful eyes of everyone. Shin-nan had been practicing martial arts for the past 3 months and he had made huge improvements, achieving the postnatal early stage. He could not imagine that he would fly away after being slapped by Su Zimo. The other party was not being swift in his attack. Why could he not react in time? In the eyes of the ruffians, they had different views to Su Zimo's attack. No ordinary man would be able to send people 10 feet away with the strength of the palm. But everyone present survived through battles and fights. Many of them were postnatal experts. Mo Song and several others were postnatal perfected. They thought nothing of Su Zimo. "Kill him for me!" Shin-nan's cheek was swollen and there was blood at the corner of his lips. He laid on the ground and hollered as he pointed his finger at Su Zimo. Without waiting for Shin-nan's orders, Mo Song already led a group of men to slash at Su Zimo. They attacked him from all sides. It was frightening. Although Su Zimo had been cultivating for 3 months, he only knew 3 styles and he had never engaged in a fight with others. Su Zimo felt a slight panic at the current situation. He automatically used Plow Heaven Stride and charged toward Mo Song. Swish! Su Zimo took 2 steps forward, covering a distance of more than 10 feet. His speed was alarming, and he managed to escape from most of the attacks directed at him. The rest of the people seemed to have blurred vision. A shadow flashed past them and their knives and swords missed the target. "No!" Mo Song's eyelids kept twitching. His countenance changed. The other people could not tell, but Mo Song, who was at the front, shivered at the monstrous force that was directed at him when Su Zimo took 2 steps forward. Su Zimo was no longer a feeble scholar. He was obviously a ferocious beast that devoured humans. Mo's song had yet to recover from his shock and therefore he was slow to react. By then, Zimo had already reached Mo's song's side. He stretched his arms from under his abdomen, clenching his fists with the joint of his index finger slightly raised, thrusting and pushing forward. Zimo was very familiar with these series of movements. He would be able to execute it with precision even when he shut his eyes. And right now, Zimo directed all his pent-up frustrations in the past 3 months in his attack. Poof! Everyone turned silent. Mo's song had an odd expression on his face. He lowered his head slowly and realized there were 2 bloody hollows as huge as bowls in his chest. 2 muscular arms were protruding from the hollows. The blood was gone from Mo's song's face. He slanted his head and died on the spot. In the eyes of the other people, the 2 sides had only sparred with each other for a single round. Mo's song had yet to land his saber on Zimo, and the latter had already driven his arms into Mo's song's chest. 2 bloody fists were seen protruding from the back of Mo's song's chest. It was a terrifying sight. Although the ruffians of the pugilistic society had been through many fights, they could not imagine the scene that they had just witnessed. How could a fist drive a hole through blood and flesh? A postnatal perfected expert was taken down by a frail scholar. Who would have believed it if they had not seen it themselves? Murder! Zimo was in a daze. All he could remember was that Yu once told him lightly. Most of the styles in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness are killing techniques. There were killing techniques. If he used them, he would definitely take lives. Until now, Zimo finally understood her words. Someone waved a knife to hack at Zimo's neck while he was in a daze, while another person attacked him with a sword, stabbing him in the middle of his back. Clang! Clang! Instead of the sounds made by the weapons when they pierced through human flesh, one could only hear the sounds similar to the clashing of metals. The steel knife that was on Zimo's neck strangely bounced up, while the long sword in the middle of his back bent into an arc. It could not stab into his flesh. Psst! Everyone present gasped. Zimo might have worn superior class armor, and hence the sword could not stab through his flesh. But what about the steel knife that slashed his neck? There was no way to explain why it bounced back. Corporal mortification martial arts? What kind of corporal mortification martial arts would be so powerful? Although the knife and sword did not hurt Zimo, he staggered from the force of it. The skin-tempering skill could block the cutting edge of the knife and sword, but it could not block the force directed at him through the knife and sword. Zimo felt immense pain in the middle of his back and neck. He gritted his teeth to endure the pain. "Scoundrel, you must be courting death!" Zimo hollered, executing plow heaven's stride and charged toward the person on the left. Bang! Bang! Zimo plowed and made 2 deep ravines out of the ground that was made of extremely hard green stone. The gravel and small stones flew around. It was a frightening sight. The person's countenance changed. He finally knew the fear and terror Mo's song felt in the final moments before his death. Zimo was too imposing and terrifying. He merely strode forward, but the menacing aura about him was enough to suffocate him. Poof! He executed Bovine's moon-gazing, making 2 hollows in the chest of a late-stage postnatal expert. He died on the spot. Seeing that Zimo seemed immune to swords and knives, everyone had no idea how to take him down. Zimo had killed 2 men consecutively in no time. His blood seemed to be boiling. The initial panic and tension had disappeared. "And you?" Zimo turned and directed his fiery gaze at the last person. The person had boasted of wounding Uncle Jing just now. But he felt a chill at his back and had goosebumps all over his body now that Zimo fixed his gaze on him. "Everyone, let's attack him at once. No matter how powerful his corporal mortification martial arts is, he would definitely have a vital gate, and there's a limit to his endurance," the man hollered. Everyone in the courtyard felt like taking him down together, but they were still wary of him. They were frightened by his menacing aura and they did not attack at once. Ta! 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 Su Zimo took 3 steps and had already arrived in front of the man in no time. He executed Bovine's moon gazing without another word. The man already realized that Su Zimo only executed the few styles. Although he was frightened by the sheer power of Plough Heaven's stride, he was able to avoid the attack by dropping to the ground agilely. He did not care to preserve his dignity, but to execute a lazy donkey roll. Bovine's moon-gazing was meant to attack one's waist and upper abdomen. The man counterattacked with the move and was able to avoid Su Zimo's fists. Even so, he could still smell a strong and musty smell of blood in the air, extinguishing all his desire to fight back. Run! He is invincible! The man managed to escape from his Bovine's moon-gazing. Su Zimo watched as his opponent rolled about on the floor, feeling somewhat confused. This was the only movement technique that he knew. If Bovine's moon-gazing was unable to kill the opponent, Su Zimo had no other way to defeat him. Right then, a thought came to Su Zimo's mind and he took big strides to catch up with the opponent. Lazy donkey roll might be a brilliant move and when used occasionally, it was quite effective. However, his speed of rolling on the floor would not be as fast as his running legs. Su Zimo roared and caught up to the man in no time. The man heard Su Zimo's roar and knew that he was in serious trouble, looking upward at him. His view was blocked by flying gravel and stones. Right then, an enormous force smashed right into his chest. Bang! The next moment, the man smashed against the wall, and he slowly slipped off the wall seconds later. His chest was punctured and he died on the spot. Su Zimo was able to react according to circumstances, using the brute force of Plough Heaven's stride to kick at the man. Killing techniques. Plough Heaven's stride was a killing technique as well. Several experts at the courtyard who were jeering at Su Zimo turned silent. There was fear in their eyes. Everyone retreated slowly, for fear that they would be Su Zimo's next target. It was understandable that everyone was fearful of him. Su Zimo had displayed very formidable prowess. It had only been 10 minutes since he made his first move and he had already killed 2 postnatal perfected experts and 1 late-stage postnatal expert. Su Zimo sneered as he turned to walk toward Shen Nan who had turned pale in fright. What do you want? Shen Nan's voice trembled. He wanted to turn and flee, but his legs were too weak. They gave way on him and he could only sit limply on the ground, while he inched slowly away from Su Zimo. Whose idea was it today? Su Zimo towered Shen Nan, looking down at him, as he posed his question, enunciating each word slowly. And no, it's not me. Who is it? Su Zimo roared with anger. Shen Nan trembled, gasping for air. There was a flicker of malice in his eyes as he said through gritted teeth. If you dare to wound me, Su family will be exterminated. Su Zimo's expression darkened. He squinted his eyes. Are you threatening me? Su Zimo had barely suppressed his murderous intent, but he could feel the strong urge to kill again. Right then, an eerie and sorrowful sound could be heard from the inner hall of Shen family's residence. You are a junior, you must be courting death. How dare you behave so atrociously here? Chapter 7 Connate Expert. Chapter 7 Connate Expert. The voice was still resonating in the figure that was as fast as a ghost swooshed and appeared right before him. Su Zimo took a careful look. He was a middle-aged man. His cheeks were gaunt, but he had eagle-like sharp eyes. He merely pointed his toes on the ground and he covered the distance in no time, standing right in front of him. Su Zimo was shocked. The middle-aged man was much stronger than the crowd in the courtyard in terms of his movement technique and aura. Connate Expert. Buzz! The middle-aged man hid his hand behind his back. He suddenly stretched out his hand and it was accompanied by a clear buzzing sound of the sword. A cold longsword stabbed towards Su Zimo's face. The tip of the sword trembled like a flexible poisonous snake, giving out tongue-lashing sounds. It was disturbing. The sword had yet to reach him, but a gush of cold air blew against his face. Su Zimo felt slight pain on his face. Su Zimo realized that given the strength and toughness of his skin right now, he could never stop this sword. The power of the Connate expert was enough to threaten his life. After all, Su Zimo barely had any fighting experience. He lost his focus just now and missed the chance to make the first strike. Even if Su Zimo executed Bovine's moon-gazing to withstand the force from the sword, his head would already be pierced through by his sword. Retreat! Su Zimo had no time to think. He executed Plow Heaven's stride and retreated quickly. Humph! The middle-aged man sneered loudly, increasing his speed, and his sword followed Su Zimo right on his heels. There was no way that Su Zimo could escape from his advancing sword. The tip of the sword was within distances of Su Zimo's face. The situation was very dangerous for Su Zimo. Su Zimo could only see the glitter of the sword in front of him. His eyes hurt, and he could not help but shed tears. Right then, there was a look of malice in the middle-aged man's eyes. "Oh no, there is the wall right behind me!" Su Zimo's heart sank. The courtyard of the Shin family's residence might be spacious, but there was a boundary as well. Both parties were advancing and retreating in a superior speed, and in the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had been forced to retreat to the wall. There was no way to retreat. Even if Su Zimo used brute force to break the wall, there would be a moment of delay. The middle-aged man was able to slash Su Zimo with his sword in that single moment. "Stop!" A figure suddenly barged in from the door, carrying a steel saber in his hand. The figure yelled and charged aggressively towards the middle-aged man. "It's Uncle Lu!" Although Su Zimo could not afford the slightest distraction to check the person who arrived, he could tell from the voice the identity of the person. The middle-aged man took a glance and sneered. Lu Yu was only a postnatal perfected. Even if he was a Connate expert, he would not be able to save Su Zimo. There was only a stone's throw distance away between the long sword and Su Zimo. "It's too late, he will die for sure!" The middle-aged man snarled lightly. His expression turned cold as he charged forward with his sword. In this moment of life and death, Su Zimo suddenly calmed down. There was not the least bit of panic in his eyes. He was unexpectedly calm, and his senses became sharper than usual. Su Zimo knew very well that he was the only one who was capable of saving himself. Faced with the advancing sword, Su Zimo closed his eyes instead, and the scene of cattle grazing grass in the cultivation field flashed in his mind. Su Zimo raised his palm automatically and rested it on the body of the advancing sword. Rap, hit, pull. Bovine-tongued saber, the most powerful style among the tri-bovine style. Pa! A crisp sound that was as loud as thunder resonated in the courtyard of Shin family's residence. The next moment, everyone froze on the spot. There were confusion, doubt, and disbelief in their eyes. The long sword in the middle-aged man's hands was shattered into multiple fragments. He was left with nothing but the hilt of the sword. The fragments scattered onto the ground. There was a strange brilliance about them. The middle-aged man opened his mouth, his pupil constricted suddenly, as he looked at Su Zimo, who was not far from him. He did not advance, instead he retreated a few steps and looked wary. Su Zimo opened his eyes, panting slightly. He looked somewhat confused. Had he survived? Moments ago, Su Zimo finally realized what death felt like. Until now, Su Zimo still felt that everything was surreal. There was a breeze in the air. Su Zimo's back was drenched in perspiration. He was so terrified that he broke out in cold sweats. "Hurry, let's go!" Right then, Su Zimo could hear Lu Yu's voice by his ear. Lu Yu pulled him by the arm and he automatically followed Lu Yu to run out of Shin family's residence. Apart from everyone present in the Shin family's residence, Su Zimo himself was unable to recover himself. He was in a state of confusion as he hung his head and ran with Uncle Lu. Along the way, Lu Yu kept looking at Su Zimo. Before this, not long after Su Zimo left Su family's residence, Uncle Jing told him that second young master looked odd. He was worried that he might go to the Shin family's residence to demand an explanation, and he ordered Lu Yu to protect him. By the time he reached Shin family's residence, he already saw the middle-aged man attacking Su Zimo. Lu Yu had good eyesight. He could tell that the man was a Connate expert. He did not understand why Su Zimo, a feeble scholar provoked a Connate expert. The situation was critical, and he had no time to think. All he could do was to make the first move to save Su Zimo. However, the scene that Lu Yu saw thereafter was a huge shock to him. Lu Yu's eyes kept lingering on Su Zimo's palm. He had lots of doubts, and he wondered what was going on. Could it be that second young master put on an armor-like glove? But even so, how much power would he need to shatter the long sword of the Connate expert to pieces? The most puzzling thing was that he could not tell that Su Zimo had been practicing martial arts. In fact, he seemed thinner than before. Weird. Lu Yu had an idea and decided to test Su Zimo. He released his grip on Su Zimo and increased his speed. Su Zimo hung his head, looking absent-minded. He seemed to be deep in his thoughts, but he followed right behind Lu Yu automatically. Lu Yu and Su Zimo reached Su family's residence in no time. There were beads of perspiration on Lu Yu's forehead and he was breathing heavily, but he could not hide the surprise in his eyes. He sped up thrice consecutively on the way back. To the end he had already reached his limit, but Su Zimo was still following closely behind. The most scary thing was that Su Zimo was breathing like usual, and he did not seem as if he was tired or exhausted. It was obvious that he still had a lot of energy. Su Zimo had finally recovered himself upon reaching Su family's residence. Actually, Su Zimo was just as shocked as everyone. Although Su Zimo could tell more or less that the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness was extraordinary, he did not expect that he would have such power after cultivating for merely 3 months. Su Zimo looked at his palm. There was no injuries. Success. Su Zimo had mastered Bovine-tongued saber during the life and death moment just now. Su Zimo was overjoyed and thought of sharing the news with Dai Yu later and to show off to her. But then, Su Zimo seemed to sense something and he looked up to see that Lu Yu was staring at him with an odd expression. "What is wrong, Uncle Lu?" Su Zimo asked. Lu Yu said in a low voice. "Nothing, go on in. You should rest in your room, I will look for you later." Su Zimo nodded. Lu Yu sent Su Zimo away and went directly to Uncle Zheng's room, telling everything that he saw at Shen family's residence to him. Everyone in the room was surprised. If not for the fact that it was Lu Yu who told them, no one would believe it. Could it be that second young master is a Connate expert? Yuchihu asked. Lu Yu shook his head. People who practice martial arts would have significant changes in their physique. For instance, the temple will bulge and the knuckles will be bigger. There will be calluses on the hands and one will have a strong physique. But I don't see these changes in second young master. He does not have any calluses and he has long fingers. It doesn't seem as if he has used a weapon before. Uncle Zheng also said. Second young master has spent all his time on studying, he didn't have the chance to practice martial arts. It's impossible that we not know about it. What's more, one would need to practice for 10 years before one can advance to a Connate. And we are referring to those who are gifted and cultivated and practice the mental cultivation method and internal power. Second young master is still so young. Lu Yu thought about it and said, On the way back, I deliberately tested second young master and I can be certain that his movement technique is faster and above me. Ah! Everyone was shocked. As the leader of the Su family guards, although Lu Yu was not well versed in movement technique, he ranked the top 10 in terms of his speed. Uncle Zheng frowned and asked, Did second young master cultivate some superb qigong? There were superior qigong in the pugilistic society that were similar to chasing toad in 8 steps. After cultivation, one was as light as the swallow, and it could indeed increase the speed of one's movement technique. Unlikely. Lu Yu shook his head and said, Second young master merely kept up with me without using any martial arts. He did not use any clever moves. Everyone was puzzled. Lu Yu said in a low voice, If I am correct, the middle-aged man is Tang Mingjun. He is known as the soul-reaping sword. He is an early-stage Connate expert. This does not make sense. Why will a Connate expert attack second young master? Won't it be a disgrace to him? Uncle Zheng frowned slightly. What Uncle Zheng meant was that if the person wanted to kill second young master, he could send anyone who had practiced martial arts. There was no need for a Connate expert to do it. Actually, Lu Yu arrived too late in time. He did not see that Su Zimo had killed 3 people consecutively. By the time he arrived, Su Zimo was in a dangerous situation. Lu Yu had yet to take in the surroundings around him, and he brought Su Zimo to flee from Shin family's residence. No one present would have known that it was not that Tang Mingjun, the soul-reaping sword, wanted to attack Su Zimo. In fact, he was forced to do it. Oh no! Right then, one of the Su family guards pushed the door open, looking alarmed and panicked. There are many people outside. They look aggressive, saying that they want second young master to pay a life for a life. Don't panic, who are these people? Lu Yu asked in a deep voice. They are from Zhao family and Li family. Shin Nan from the Shin family also brought many people with him. The Su family guard swallowed with difficulty before he replied, breathing heavily. A life for a life? Uncle Jing spoke softly, deep in his thoughts. If according to what Liu said, Su Zimo did not kill anyone in the Shin family, why would they demand him to pay a life for a life? Damn, this is a clear provocation. How could second young master kill someone? I will go out to meet them. Yu Chiho was riled up. He stood up and dashed outside. Wait. Uncle Jing coughed before he said softly, help me out. Mr. Jing, you must not move about so as not to aggravate your injuries. Lu Yu hurried to stop him. Uncle Jing shook his head. His attitude was firm. He who comes is surely ill-intentioned. Now that young master is not around, I have to take a look no matter what. The few of them from the Su family went out to take a look, and their hearts sank. There were hundreds of people outside the residence. All of them looked menacing and most of them were postnatal pugilistic experts. 3 of them were early-stage Connate experts. Tang Mingjun was one of them. Given Su family's manpower and capabilities now, if they did not deal with this properly, all of them might end up dead. Chapter 8 Su Hong. Chapter 8 Su Hong. The burly chap dressed in martial arts outfit standing behind young Master Zhao might be a mid-stage Connate. Everyone, try to take things lying down and don't take the offensive. We must wait until young Master is back. Uncle Zheng whispered. Everyone in the Su family was shocked. Mid-stage Connate. Lu Yu whispered. The man looks unfamiliar, he might not belong to Pingyang town. Be on your guard. Where is Su Zimo? Get him to come out. Shin Nan covered his swollen face and shouted angrily. Lu Yu stepped forward and said in a deep voice with cupped fists. What's with the crowd? Why do you want to look for second young master? A young man in a brocade robe who was one of the leading men held a folding fan in his hands and smiled. A life for a life. It's right and unalterable. Second young master Su had to pay for killing people. The person was Zhao Yu, young master Zhao. He was a postnatal perfected, he was well known in Pingyang town. The person next to him was Li Yuan Mao, young master Li. To hell with you! Yu Chiwa pointed to Zhao Yu, ranting out loud. If you insist to pay a life for a life, you must do so first. You have taken Brother Guan's life. Uncle Sheng had a severe cough, gasping for breath. What proof do you have that second young master has taken 3 lives? Ha ha! Shin Nan grinned hideously. Old man, everyone in Shin family witnessed how Su Zimo killed them. With that, the people from Shin family edged to the front carrying the corpses of Amos Song and the rest. Although they were dead, they did not shut their eyes. There were terror and fear in their eyes. It went to show that they were greatly shocked moments before their deaths. Lu Yu and the rest were taken aback when they saw the corpses. It was too ruthless. The chests of 2 of them seemed to have been pierced through by weapons that were as thick as arms, while the chest of the other person collapsed and his bones were shattered. Uncle Jing swept his gaze over them, remaining calm as he shook his head. He who has a mind to beat his dog will easily find his stick. Everyone in Pingyang town knows that second young master is a scholar. How can he possibly kill these 3 postnatal experts? Enough of your nonsense! Zhao Yu spread out his paper fan, saying coldly, If the Su family doesn't hand Su Zimo over, all of you will have to die today. I am the one who killed them. At this time, a voice came from outside the crowd, and everyone turned toward the sound. A green-robed scholar strode up with big steps, his head high and chest out. It was Su Zimo. Su Zimo stood in front of everyone from the Su family, displaying no fear at the hundreds of people in front of him, giving a loud shout. I killed them, I will take responsibility for it. Second young master, don't be impulsive. Yuchi stopped him. Lu Yu whispered. Second young master, they have evil intentions. They are after other motives. It is just an excuse to look for you. Don't fall for it. Hee hee. Li Yuanmao had a strange smile. Since second young master Su has admitted to it, things are simple. Get him. Protect second young master. Uncle Zheng's tone was firm and steady. At no costs. Clang. Everyone unsheathed their weapons. Lu Yu and the rest surrounded Su Zimo and Uncle Zheng, protecting them from the crowd. The two parties were on the verge of breaking into fights. Zhao Yu kept his folding fan and coldly said, Capture Su Zimo. Kill all those who stand in the way. Su Zimo clenched his fists, getting ready to execute Plow Heaven's stride. He wanted to dash into the crowd to fight with the Connate experts. In all fairness, he could hardly deal with the early-stage Connate experts. Moreover, there was a mid-stage Connate expert among them. But right now, there were no other options. Suddenly, galloping sounds could be heard from afar. In no time, it was nearing them. I will kill whoever who dares to touch my younger brother! Su Hong shouted. The crowd dispersed, as a single man rode a horse and galloped toward them, full of murderous intent. He tightened the reins upon reaching Su family's residence. The man rode on a tall horse and held an iron spear of the flowing spring. There was a powerful and murderous aura about him. His gaze was fiery, and one dared not look him in the eyes. There was a hideous scar on the person's face. It stretched from his glabella to his earlobe. Although it had healed, the tender red skin near the wound was protruding from the scar. It looked frightening, and the person looked even more vicious with it. Su Hong, young Master Su! Everyone in the Su family was glad to see him. They could not conceal their joy at seeing him. Zhao Yu, Li Yuanmao, have the two of you matured? How dare you seek trouble at the Su family? Su Hong did not get off the horse. Instead, he sat on the horse, looking down on the two of them, his tone icy cold. Ha, so it's young Master Su. You have come at the right time. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Zhao Yu smiled. He seemed to have come prepared. The burly chap who stood behind Zhao Yu was dressed in martial arts outfit. His eyes were cold, and he carried a thick saber on his back. He shouted, I heard that young master is an early-stage Connate expert at 30 years old. You are a giant among men. It's my pleasure to meet you today. Shall we exchange blows to learn from each other? I have no interest in the name of the dead. The person had yet to finish his sentence, and he was cut off by Su Hong. Go! Su Hong gave a soft yell and his horse charged forward, reaching the burly chap dressed in martial arts outfit in no time, thrusting his long spear at the same time. You must be courting death! The burly chap looked calm while he took out his thick sword, releasing his Connate aura. He jumped up, raising his arms while swinging his saber at Su Hong, who was coming toward him. He is indeed a mid-stage Connate. Lu Yu nodded. Su Zimo felt nervous upon hearing his words. The Zhao family had come prepared. They even estimated that Su Hong might rush back, and therefore they asked a mid-stage Connate expert to deal with him. Su Zimo swept his gaze over the crowd. To his surprise, neither Lu Yu nor Uncle Zheng and the rest of them were nervous. What did that mean? He was still pondering when Su Hong and the burly chap exchanged blows. Clang! The thick saber of the burly chap landed heavily on the iron spear of the flowing spring. Sparks came flying. The force was so huge that the horse that Su Hong was riding was forced to a stop. Ha ha! Su Hong laughed. He flicked the iron spear of the flowing spring. It gave off a buzzing tremor, followed by a stunning force that bounced the thick saber away. The burly chap's countenance changed. Poof! Blood was splattered all over the floor. The burly chap was sent flying by Su Hong's spear, landing on the long street, his blood staining the ground. You pretended that you are of a lower level, why you are late. The burly chap had yet to finish his sentence, but blood kept surging in his mouth. It was obvious that he would not get to live past tomorrow. Everyone was shocked. Nobody expected that they had only exchanged blows for 1 round and a mid-stage Connate expert would be killed by a single thrust of Su Hong's spear. The most terrifying thing was what the burly chap said moments before he died. Although he did not finish his sentence, everyone present could guess what he meant. Late-stage Connate. All these years, people in the Pingyang town had underestimated Su Hong's abilities. Hurry, let's go! The Connate experts of the Zhao family, Li family and Shen family reacted quickly by protecting their masters and fleeing from the scene. All the pugilistic experts were frightened by the aura of a single man. They fled hurriedly, having no intention to stay for another second. Su Hong sneered, making no move to chase them. He got down from the horse, nodding at Su Zimo before he said, "Back to the residence." Inner hall of Su family's residence. Su Hong sat in the middle like the master of the house, as Lu Yu gave a report on what happened in Pingyang town these past few months. He would nod occasionally as he listened to him. Su Zimo sat at the side, with his head lowered, keeping silent. Before this, his older brother never allowed him to enter the inner hall and he never participated in such meetings. After Lu Yu was done with his report, Su Hong's gaze landed on Su Zimo. He asked in a deep voice, "Did you really kill the 3 postnatal experts from Shen family?" "Yes." Su Zimo hesitated slightly before he admitted it. Bang! Initially, Su Hong was seated on a chair, but then he stood up suddenly, placing his feet on the ground, letting off a loud sound. He reached Su Zimo in no time, and he punched in his direction. This happened too quickly, everyone in the inner hall, let alone Su Zimo, could react in time. Su Zimo was startled. He had yet to recover from his shock and he automatically stretched out his palm, landing on Su Hong's fist. Rap, hit, and he was about to execute Bovine-tongued saber. But right then, Su Zimo remembered the scene when he shattered the long sword of the Connate expert at Shen family's residence. The power of Bovine-tongued saber had just been executed and Su Zimo stopped in mid-tracks. Bang! There was a loud sound as the palm and fist clashed with each other. The chair that Su Zimo was sitting on broke into pieces. Su Zimo lost his balance under the impact of the strike. He was about to sit back on the floor when he released the power of Plow Heaven's stride automatically. Su Zimo sank and it seemed as if his entire body was lying flat on the ground. However, his legs did not move a single inch and he was rooted into the ground. Su Zimo exerted strength at his waist and legs at the same time and stood up. His move was really brilliant, and everyone in the inner hall could not help but be amazed. There was a sparkle in Su Hong's eyes, he kept nodding as he smiled. Good, good, you have done a good job by killing them. Su Zimo knew that his older brother was testing him just now. Right at the moment when the palm and fist collided, he could feel that his older brother had cut back on the force exerted. Of course, Su Zimo did not use all his force, he stopped in mid-tracks as well. Su Zimo knew the power of Bovine-tongued saber. He dared not use it on his older brother. Zimo, you should go back to rest. It is nothing to lose the scholarly honors. There are plenty of good ladies in the world. Don't take it to heart. Xiaoning will be back from Songlang City soon. If you have time, do keep her company. Su Xiaoning was Su Zimo's younger sister. She was 2 years younger than him. She was sent by Su Hong to study at Songlang City as well. Su Zimo smiled as he agreed to it, he then turned to leave. Su Hong watched as Su Zimo left. He remained silent for a long while, seeming to have mixed feelings. Young master? Lu Yu asked softly. Su Hong recovered himself, speaking softly. I don't think Zimo is cultivating any internal power. He used his body's strength to withstand the impact from my fist just now. I have heard from others that some people are born with immense strength. Second young master could be such people. Lu Yu was glad. Su Hong smiled. This is not just a matter of strength. When we sparred just now, I felt pain in my arm. It was as if it has been distorted. I suppose he did not use his full force. Yuchiwa said. Since second young master is so capable, why don't we tell him about our origin and our intention? No! Su Hong shook his head. His attitude was firm. Previously I forbade Zimo from learning martial arts as I don't want him to be embroiled in it. I don't intend to live, but nothing must happen to Zimo and Xiaoning. This is final. I will hear no more about it. Uncle Zheng sighed. I watched second young master as he grew up. Given his intelligence, I am afraid he has already discovered something amiss. He won't know as long as we keep it a secret. Chapter 9 Body Tempering Sutra. Chapter 9 Body Tempering Sutra. The Su family came to Pingyang town 15 years ago. There were only Uncle Jing, Lu Yu and some other people with them. Su Hong was 15 years old, while Su Zimo was only 2 years old and Su Xiaoning was just born. Their parents died that year. According to the Su family, they encountered a lot of beasts where they passed by Tsanglang mountain range. Many of them died, and their parents were among those who died. Su Zimo had always been skeptical of this statement all these years. Su Zimo felt that his older brother and the rest of the Su family had been hiding many things, other than their parents' death from he and his sister. Back then, when his older brother gave him the mansion, it was said that he could study hard without anyone disturbing him, but Su Zimo knew that his older brother meant to send him away. Su Zimo studied hard to get scholarly honors so that there would be a day where he could help his brother. However, Su Zimo had finally sorted out his thoughts after reaching his mansion. Since his brother refused to tell him, he would not force him. His only hope was that he would become stronger so that no matter how dangerous the situation was, they could survive it. Su Zimo stepped into the cultivation field. Daiyu was lazing around on the green stone. She did not cast him a look. It was as if she did not see Su Zimo come in. I have succeeded at Bovine-tongued saber, Su Zimo said. Daiyu acknowledged him with an indifferent attitude. Su Zimo knew that it was considered as a praise to get Daiyu's acknowledgement. Go in to cultivate. Daiyu pointed to the wooden barrel not too far away. The wooden barrel had been in the cultivation field for quite some time. It had always been empty. Su Zimo had no idea what it was used for. Today, the barrel was filled with a thick black liquid, exuding a strong smell of medicine. So it is for my cultivation. Su Zimo jumped in without another thought. Psst! Su Zimo sucked in a cold breath as soon as he jumped into the barrel. His countenance changed. Cold. Too cold. Su Zimo felt that his hands and limbs were turning numb in no time. His hair was covered with a layer of frost. His face had turned gray and his lips purple. His body could not help but tremble uncontrollably. What is this? Su Zimo said in a quavering voice. Daiyu spoke lightly. You can come out if you can't take it. Su Zimo could not stand it anymore. He even felt that if he continued to stay in the barrel, he would freeze to death. Su Zimo had just gotten up getting ready to jump out when he caught a glimpse of scoff in Daiyu's eyes. He was riled. He clenched his teeth and sat back down in the barrel. He had only taken 10 breaths and he felt a chill to his bones. Under the stimulation of the medicinal liquid, Su Zimo began to lose his consciousness. Su Zimo remembered what Daiyu said to him in the past. If you want to learn this cultivation technique, you will experience unimaginable dangers. You may lose your life at any time. Do not expect me to save you. Su Zimo knew that even if he froze to death, Daiyu would not save him. Su Zimo shut his eyes, trying to ignore the coldness that he felt. He used the breathing and expiration method of skin tempering and began to breathe slowly. All of a sudden, there were a few mysterious and lengthy sutra in Su Zimo's mind and he could hear Daiyu's voice. There is in fact only one sutra in body tempering. Since you have no foundation, hence I divided it into two parts, skin tempering and flesh tempering. What you saw just now is the Sutra for flesh tempering. From today onward, you will combine both of them when you cultivate. The breathing method of flesh tempering originates from Rock Bear Demon King. The flesh of the bear is thick and sturdy. It is slow but powerful. It has the power to erect its neck, strengthen its upper limb, come out from its cave with full force, and to fight the tiger majestically. Combine the two methods of breathing, and it will be the Body Tempering Sutra. Daiyu explained while she taught Su Zimo the breathing and expiration method. Su Zimo began to get the gist of it gradually, and his breathing became slow and long. With each breathing and expiration, the essence of the medicinal liquid in the wooden barrel would rush into his body through the pores on his skin, supplementing the skin and nourishing the blood and flesh. This kind of cultivation method was much more direct and effective than devouring food and cultivating. Su Zimo felt that his own flesh and blood were being nourished. His skin had toughened and he seemed to have grown more muscular. If Su Zimo opened his eyes at this time, he would see an even more shocking scene. The black viscous liquid had formed a huge vortex in the wooden barrel. Su Zimo hovered in the middle of the vortex. A cow-shaped monster and a bear-shaped monster loomed next to Su Zimo. They were hazy, but their eyes were bright and exuded a cold, eerie light. They looked ferocious and they exuded an aura that could shake heaven and earth. With the passage of time, the chill in the body gradually dissipated. An inexhaustible amount of essence continued to cleanse his muscles and skin. Su Zimo's realm had been advancing rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the night had passed. Su Zimo opened his eyes and was surprised to find that the liquid in the wooden barrel had become transparent, and was as clear as water. Daiyu jumped down from the green stone, saying, "I will impart 3 more styles to you. The first style is ground rupturing palm. The angle of the palm can change as you please. All you need to remember is the technique to execute the force and to understand the concept of rupturing the ground." Daiyu raised her hands slightly as she explained. Su Zimo had an idea and he shut his eyes. Su Zimo had a strange thought. It was as if he was not facing Daiyu but a hideous bear demon. It raised its gigantic bear paw and smashed it down suddenly. Although Su Zimo knew that it was only an illusion, under the powerful impact of the slam, he could not help but retreat. Swoosh! Su Zimo forgot that he was still in the barrel. He collapsed on the ground, looking like a mess. The water in the barrel was spilled all over the floor. The second style is mountain reliance. You have to exert all your strength and press forward, and the opponent will die. He will have no time to react. Daiyu nudged her foot and pressed forward, her body shaking. Su Zimo's pupil constricted instantly. The air around Daiyu froze when she executed the mountain reliance. It seemed to turn solid then spread out thereafter. The air around them was not immune to the swiftness and impact of the pressing in movement. The third style, body petrification. Daiyu paused before saying, "This is the defensive method of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. It can be considered as a mental cultivation method. After you succeed, the flesh and blood will turn into a boulder instantly. One becomes indestructible, minimizing the injuries sustained." Su Zimo began practicing Tri-Rock Bear style while Daiyu watched coldly by the side, pointing out whenever he made a mistake. Whenever Daiyu pointed out his mistakes, Su Zimo would be in agony. At the end of the day, Su Zimo had not made any progress with the Tri-Rock Bear style, but he was already covered with wounds. He had bruises all over his body and he was drenched in perspiration, lying down drained of all energy on the grass, panting heavily. Of course, Su Zimo knew very well that if not for such a harsh environment, it would take him even longer to succeed in Tri-Rock Bear style. At night, Daiyu prepared another barrel of medicinal liquid for Su Zimo's cultivation. The amazing part was that, regardless of how heavily injured Su Zimo was in the day, after cultivating in the wooden barrel for a night, he would be alive and healthy in the day, and he would not have any scars on his body. In the next 3 months, Su Zimo slaughtered cattle and ate them, practicing tri-rock bear style in the day and going into the wooden barrel at night, practicing his breathing and expiration under the stimulation of the medicinal liquid. Su Zimo gritted his teeth to endure the endless cultivation. Under such a harsh cultivation environment, Su Zimo had a deeper understanding of body tempering sutra. He was able to reach initial success at his ground-rupturing palm and mountain reliance. However, he did not make much progress with body petification. Su Zimo's skin had changed from the rough texture when he first practiced Bovine style to being smooth and delicate. It was as if he had regained the natural state. His skin looked as fair as jade, but in fact it was even tougher than before. Su Zimo had become more muscular, and his body was firm and sturdy. He seemed to become taller. Although he was only 17 years old, he was more than 6 feet tall, similar to Dai Yu's height. 3 months ago, when Su Zimo tried his hand at Shin family's residence, he was slashed by swords in the fight. Although he did not sustain any external injuries, the impact from the saber and sword still caused damage to his muscles and he was in pain for a long time. Right now, Su Zimo surmised that if he was stabbed by postnatal perfected experts, it would not cause any damage to him. After cultivating body tempering, and through half a year of tough practice, his body was similar to swords and sabers. Of course, these were not the only changes he underwent after cultivating body tempering. He had immense strength and amazing speed. There was a sharpness in his gaze. All these brought about a transformation in Su Zimo. This morning, Su Zimo walked out of the cultivation field. He changed into a green robe, tidied up and went to the Su family's residence. Su Xiaoning would be back today. Regardless of whether it was Su Zimo, Su Hong or anyone else in the Su family, everyone doted on her, and could not bear for her to suffer any grievances. Su Zimo reached Su family's residence in no time. Second young master is back. The people in Su family were delighted and greeted him warmly. Su Zimo smiled and nodded at them. After recuperating for 3 months, Uncle Zheng's injuries had healed, but he seemed much older than before. Brother is not around again? Su Zimo asked casually. Uncle Zheng smiled. He is caught up with business recently. He had to take care of the business, and won't be able to make it back today. Su Zimo and Uncle Zheng chatted in the hall while waiting for Su Xiaoning to return. 2 hours had passed. 4 hours. Noon had passed. Sanglang City was not too far from Pingyang Town. It would take at most 2 hours to reach by foot. But right now, Su Xiaoning had yet to come back. Su Zimo turned solemn, there was a cold glitter in his eyes. Uncle Zheng frowned, thinking before he shouted. Lu Yu! Here! Uncle Zheng said in a deep voice. Bring some men to Sanglang City and check whether Miss Su has set off or not. Report to me if there's any news. No need. Su Zimo waved his hands. He knew his sister best. Su Xiaoning had been very obedient since a young age. She would never do things that would cause her family to be worried. Since Su Xiaoning had yet to reach Pingyang Town, there was only one explanation. She had run into mishap. Su Zimo stood up slowly, his expression cold. Uncle Zheng and Lu Yu could feel a suffocating pressure at his single movement. These two people had been through multiple fights and battles and had many experiences where they had a close brush with death. They had no fear even when they faced immortals or thousands of army. But right now, they could not help but tremble with fear when facing Su Zimo. Second young master has indeed changed. Uncle Zheng and Lu Yu stared at each other, having the same thought. Report, Shin Nan from the Shin family is outside the door, seeking entry. One of the Su family guard shouted. Uncle Zheng took in a deep breath. Let him in. Hee, how are all of you doing? Shortly after, Shin Nan, who was clad in white, strolled in smilingly. Su Zimo did not utter a word. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at Shin Nan. Shin Nan's heart skipped a beat. For some unknown reason, Shin Nan felt like being targeted by a ferocious tiger and a starving wolf. He might be torn into pieces in a blink of an eye. I am only here to send a message. Zhao family and Li family wanted to invite the two young masters of Su family to a banquet, Shannan hurried to say, feeling somewhat guilty. Su Zimo came to Shannan's side, saying calmly, "My brother is not in, I will go with you." "Second young master, there must be something funny about the banquet. You must not go." Lu Yu hurried forward and whispered to Su Zimo's ears. Su Zimo swept his gaze at him. Lu Yu bowed his head, and said through clenched teeth, "Second young master, I will go with you." Su Xiaoning was missing and the Zhao family suddenly invited Su Hong and Su Zimo to a banquet. It was obvious that it was an ambush. He might not make it back alive. But he would never stand by while second young master went alone to fight the enemy. "Lu Yu, young master Zhao has said that he only invited the two young masters from Su family. No one is to go with him, otherwise." Shannan did not finish his sentence, but it was obvious that he was threatening them. "Lead the way," Su Zimo said coolly. Shannan gave Uncle Sheng and Lu Yu a provocative look, before he sneered and swaggered away from Su family's residence. "Mr. Zheng, what do we do? Should I bring people to attack then? Nothing must happen to second young master." Lu Yu was anxious. "No." Uncle Jing shook his head, frowning. "The other party is obviously ready. Right now, the Zhao family's residence is full of danger. Given our current strength, we will not be able to compete with them." Uncle Zheng paused for a long while before he said in a deep voice, "Get the nearest black armored cavalry to come as soon as possible." "But will they be able to arrive in time?" Lu Yu asked. "I have no idea." Uncle Zheng sighed. "Right now, we can only hope that second young master and Miss Su can hold on for as long as possible. This is the only solution." Chapter 10 Attend the Banquet Alone. Chapter 10 Attend the Banquet Alone. Su Zimo had just entered the Zhao family courtyard, and the doors slowly closed behind him. The two sides of the courtyard were full of people. They were postnatal experts. They had their weapons ready, they were glittering with coldness. They looked surprised when they saw that it was Su Zimo who arrived at the courtyard. Many of them ridiculed and sneered, shaking their heads at him. The hall at the Zhao family's residence was situated at the end of the courtyard. There was an 8-seater square table at the end. Many people were already seated, including Zhao Yu and Li Yuanmao. Shannan arrived with Su Zimo and went to take a seat at the table. Su Zimo walked slowly into the hall, his eyes sweeping over everyone, looking calm and composed. There were a total of 17 people in the hall. Except for Zhao Yu, Li Yuanmao and Shannan, everyone was a Connate expert. Among them were Tang Mingjun, the soul-reaping sword, who once sparred with him in Shan family's residence. Out of the 14 Connate experts, 7 of them had stronger aura than Tang Mingjun. 3 of them had the strongest aura. Not surprisingly, 4 out of the 7 people were mid-stage Connate experts, while the other 3 were late-stage Connate experts. Su Zimo had a grasp of the situation now. The Zhao family was obviously taking drastic measures to deal with the situation. They wanted to get rid of he and his brother today. Unfortunately, Su Hong was not around. "We wanted to catch a big fish, but we did not expect to catch a small shrimp instead. If we had known, there is no need to gather such a crowd over here." Zhao Yu sneered, looking at Su Zimo with disdain. "Where's my sister?" Su Zimo sounded calm and composed. Zhao Yu clapped his hands. 2 women walked out side by side from the back of the hall. To be exact, one of which was being held hostage. Su Xiaoning wore a green dress, looking quick-witted. She was 15 years old, and she was already beautiful and had a flawless complexion. However, at this time, Su Xiaoning had tears in her eyes and she was trying to contain her tears. She pursed her lips as she stared at Su Zimo, refusing to say a word. Su Zimo's heart ached at the sight of her. All these years, this was the first time that he had seen his sister in such a predicament. She must have suffered a lot of grievances. Li Yuanmao smiled. "The person next to her is my younger sister, Li Xiangtong. It seems like she gets along very well with Miss Su." The lady next to Su Xiaoning smiled, pulling Su Xiaoning to take a seat. She waved a sharp dagger in her hands while she spoke softly. Sister, don't cry. I'll do manicure for you. While Li Xiangtong was talking, she pulled Su Xiaoning's trembling fingers and glided the dagger gently across the fingertips. Ya! Li Xiangtong gasped softly as drops of blood oozed from Su Xiaoning's fingertips. It was glaringly red. Sister, you must not tremble. Fortunately, I was being careful, otherwise your fingers would be cut off. Li Xiangtong had a malicious smile on her face. Su Zimo did not move a single inch. Li Xiangtong was no weak lady. She was a postnatal expert. Su Zimo and Li Xiangtong were separated by an 8-seater square table. There were 4 mid-stage Connate experts, 3 late-stage Connate experts seated at the table. There were also 7 early-stage Connate experts who stood by both sides of Su Zimo. Su Zimo had no way to save her. Well. Right then, an elder in his 50s, seated at the 8-seater square table, clapped his hands slowly, as he nodded and said, Faced with calamities, he is still able to remain calm and unperturbed. He is a talent. This is no small shrimp. Given his temperament, he is worthy of this banquet. Zhao Yu curled his lips. I am Zhao Qingping, the master of Zhao family. The elder in his 50s pointed to the left and said, This is the Li family's master Li Xing. As for this. Zhao Qingping looked to the right, saying in a deep voice, This is Xing Yao, swordsman Zeng from Songlang City. People hailed him as Thunderbolt Saber. The person who died under Su Hong's spear 3 months ago was swordsman Zeng's junior martial brother. These 3 were late-stage Connate experts. Su Zimo remained composed as he spoke slowly. The family should not be implicated in the pugilistic affairs. Will the few of you let her go and I will stay behind to accompany you? You are not considered as part of the pugilistic society. You are merely an inferior commoner. Li Yuanmao smiled and made a dig at him. Zhao Yu spoke in a peculiar tone. It is all right if it is your brother, Su Hong, but you are not qualified. Brother, run! Su Xiaoning had barely said a few words and her mouth was covered by Li Xiangtong. She could only utter a few sounds, her tears rolling uncontrollably down her cheeks. Zhao Qingping sighed. I am an elder, and I don't want to lower myself to your level and deal with a junior like you. However, the Su family has been too arrogant. Su Zimo spoke with mockery. One should fight openly for any disputes between the family clans. The Su family would not shy from it. Aren't you worried that you will be a laughingstock by doing these insidious things? Ha ha! Li Xing, the master of the Li family, laughed and shook his head. Young lad, you are still very inexperienced. You have not encountered any sinister events in the pugilistic society. This is nothing compared to it. Is Li Xiangtong your daughter? Su Zimo raised his eyebrows slightly, asking a seemingly insignificant question. So what if she is? Li Xing snorted. Then prepare to die. A loud snarl that sounded like thunder resonated in the hall. In the meantime, Su Zimo strode forward, releasing the impact of plowing the heavens. The 8-seater square table was overturned in no time, smashing to pieces. It was too fast. No one would have thought that under such circumstances, Su Zimo would make the first move even when he was unable to save himself. Everyone except Zhao Yu and 2 other were Connate experts. They reacted quickly and grabbed their weapons, advancing towards Su Zimo, shouting in anger. What an audacious junior! All at once, there were glint and flash of cold steel everywhere in the hall. It was cold and terrifying, no one could pass through. Xing Yao, Thunderbolt Saber, had a backhand grip on his saber. There was a flash of glaring light, and he directed his attack toward the area under Su Zimo's rib. Su Zimo was oblivious to the surrounding swords and sabers. He fixed his gaze on Li Xing as he slapped with his palm, releasing a ferocious and formidable aura. Ground-rupturing palm. Li Xing's countenance changed at Su Zimo's violent and domineering aura. His first thought was to turn and flee. His years of experience in the pugilistic society told him that if he did not flee, he would definitely die. Li Xing widened his eyes in anger, giving out a loud shout. He was not in time to draw his weapon, he could only use his arms to block the attack. On the other side, Zhao Qingping held the sword with one hand, a wicked light shone in his eyes. The sword quivered slightly as it dabbed toward Su Zimo's eyes. Zhao Qingping had long heard that Su Zimo practiced corporal mortification martial arts. But no matter what type of corporal mortification martial arts one practiced, one's eyes were still vulnerable. Snap! There was a loud bone-cracking sound. Li Xing shrieked in pain. Su Zimo slapped his palms against Li Xing's arms, breaking his bones. The broken bones protruded from the flesh, being exposed. It was a gruesome sight. A late-stage Connate expert could not survive one single stroke of Su Zimo's. Everyone was aghast. After executing ground-rupturing palm, Su Zimo charged forward, capturing Li Xing by the throat. At the same time, Su Zimo took a big step toward the left. He faced Zhao Qingping sideways, putting his cheek at the mercy of his long sword, while his left hand seemed as soft as the cow tongue, wrapping around his hand. Zhao Qingping stabbed his sword at Su Zimo's cheek. However, it did not pierce through his skin, instead it bent into an arc at the strong force. Pissed! His corporal mortification martial arts is so powerful? Zhao Qingping was shocked. He knew that things were not going well, and he made a move to retreat. Right then, Su Zimo's palm rested on Zhao Qingping's arm that had yet to retract. Rap, hit, pull. Poof! Nothing could be seen except bits and pieces of flying flesh and spurting blood. The tendons and bones of Zhao Qingping had been shattered to pieces by Su Zimo's palm. The arm was being abruptly pulled out from the shoulder. Zhao Qingping fell to the ground, staring in shock at the blood spewing from the broken arm, howling in pain. Bang! 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 At the same time, all the swords and sabers that were swinging at Su Zimo bounced back. Although Su Zimo's clothes had been chopped to pieces, there was no blood on his body. Impenetrable? All the Connate experts could not get past Su Zimo's defense even with their weapons. Poof! Right then, there was an abrupt sound of weapons cutting into flesh. A saber stabbed inches into the area under Su Zimo's rib. Blood oozed out and stained the clothes. Regardless of whether it was Su Zimo or Xingyao who grabbed the saber, both were stunned momentarily. Su Zimo did not expect that someone could break through his defense. Xingyao thought that he would kill Su Zimo with one stab. Instead, the saber was stuck and he could not move at all. Xingyao was hailed as Thunderbolt Saber in the pugilistic society not because he has good with his saber. Instead, it was his saber that was famous. It was extremely sharp. It could cut a strand of hair and split metal as if it were made of soil. To his surprise, the Thunderbolt Saber did not stab through Su Zimo's flesh. Instead, it seemed to hit upon a boulder and was faced with a lot of resistance. In the end, the saber was stuck in between flesh. This was the power of body tempering. Xingyao retracted the Thunderbolt Saber and retreated a few steps. He did not continue to advance. Xingyao was wary of Su Zimo after seeing how he crushed Zhao Qingping's arm. Moreover, although the stab did not result in serious injuries, Su Zimo was wounded. He believed Su Zimo would be drained of energy eventually, and he would not be able to walk out of Zhao family's residence alive. Stop! Stop! Li Xiangtong and Su Zimo shouted at the same time. Since Su Zimo made the first move, it had only been a short while since all the postnatal experts in the courtyard rushed to join in the fight. By the time Li Xiangtong realized what was happening, her father had already been captured by Su Zimo. Li Xiangtong grabbed the dagger and placed it against Su Xiaoning's fair neck, giving a faint shout. Let my father go! Su Zimo squeezed Li Xing's throat. Li Xing could not resist as the bones in his arms had been shattered. His face turned a reddish purple, and he made gasping sounds. Let my sister go and I will let him off, Su Zimo said lightly. Su Zimo had made up his mind from the moment he ascertained Li Xing's identity. It was impossible to save Su Xiaoning right away. If anything went wrong, Su Xiaoning might die. Su Zimo dared not take the gamble. But it was relatively easy to catch everyone by surprise and capture Li Xing. Su Zimo, don't force me. If my hands shake slightly, your sister will have a wound on her face. Li Xiangtong dangled her dagger in front of Su Xiaoning's eyes. Su Zimo smiled, revealing a row of fine white teeth. If you dare to touch her, I will annihilate the Li family. Su Zimo sounded very calm. It did not seem like a threat. Instead, he seemed to be telling a fact. He sounded domineering, like it was unquestionable. Li Xiangtong's heart jumped a beat. She felt unsettled at Su Zimo's tone and expression. She had no doubts of Su Zimo's capability. Given what happened so far, once Su Zimo escaped from this place, the Zhao family and the Li family would never have peace. He was much more terrifying and vicious than Su Hong. Who exactly is the person that we have provoked? Why did we provoke him? Li Xiangtong was full of regrets. Chapter 11 Massacre. Chapter 11 Massacre. The two sides fell into a stalemate. Anyone could tell that Li Xiangtong was in a state of confusion and did not know what to do. Li Xiangtong looked toward her brother, Li Yuanmao, automatically, wanting to seek help from him. Li Yuanmao was about to say something when there was a drastic change in his expression. There was terror and fear in his eyes. Li Xiangtong's heart plummeted at the sight of Li Yuanmao's odd expression. She exerted force in her dagger, wanting to slice Su Xiaoning's throat. You have no chance anymore. This was the last sentence that Li Xiangtong heard. Li Xiangtong felt that someone had a death grip on her wrist. It was close to being squashed to pieces. She had no idea since when Su Zimo had reached her side. That was a pair of cold and murderous eyes, causing palpitations to whoever who saw it. Bang! Li Xiangtong was sent flying into the air by Su Zimo's kick. She was already dead when she was mid-air. The turn of events was so fast that no one had time to react. When Li Xiangtong glanced sideways at her brother, Su Zimo had already exerted force in his fingers, squashing Li Xing's throat, and executed plow heaven's stride to come next to Li Xiangtong, saving Su Xiaoning from her. Li Yuanmao was scared stiff. This was supposed to be an ambush on the two brothers of the Su family. They were very sure of success. But in the blink of an eye, among the three late-stage Connate experts, one died and one was injured. Xing Yao was the only one left. Su Xiaoning trembled slightly. She sobbed as she stared at Su Zimo. There was fear, panic, and a distant look in her eyes. Su Zimo's eyes turned soft, a smile on his face. He tore a piece of cloth from his clothes and covered Su Xiaoning's eyes gently. He turned the cloth for a few rounds before he tied them together. Don't be afraid, I will bring you home. Su Zimo spoke softly in his sister's ears. Xing Yao witnessed the scene. He was not in a hurry to attack, instead he felt more assured. If Su Zimo chose to fight his way out, Xing Yao believed that no one would be able to stop him, including the hundreds of postnatal experts at the courtyard. After which, Xing Yao would return to Tsanglang City as soon as possible, leaving Pingyang Town with his family, so that Su Zimo could not take revenge on him. But right now, seeing how Su Zimo highly valued Su Xiaoning, his chances of escaping here alive was smaller. To Su Zimo, Su Xiaoning was his burden and weakness. Everyone, don't panic. He has been injured by me just now. He won't be able to hold out for long. Let's all target the lady, Xing Yao sneered. Everyone present had years of experience in the pugilistic society. They knew right away what Xing Yao meant by saying that. In fact, the injury at the area under Su Zimo's rib was not as serious as what other people imagined. If Su Zimo looked at the wound, he would be shocked to discover that the muscles around the wound had hardened and he had stopped bleeding. Body petrification would not only strengthen Su Zimo's defense, it was also effective to stop bleeding and conserving one's energy. Attack! Xing Yao shouted and everyone roared in return, charging forward. Su Zimo protected Su Xiaoning in his embrace, exposing his back to all the pugilistic experts. Bang! 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 There was the smell of blood in the air, with flying arms and limbs everywhere. The sabers and swords were broken to pieces, scattered all over the ground. Mountain Reliance! He released all his power at one go, executing the powerful killing style of the Tri-Rock Bear style. Everyone who was blocking Su Zimo from behind was sent flying. Some of them were scattered into pieces instantly. There was a path streaked by blood in the chaos. Although Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness for half a year, and he only practiced the first section, the power and strength of his flesh had already reached an unimaginable level. Although he stood at the same spot, ordinary postnatal and Connate experts were unable to injure him. The reason why Xingyao was able to hurt Su Zimo was because of the thunderbolt saber in his hands. With the impact and power of Mountain Reliance, postnatal experts became completely useless in front of him. Su Zimo stopped for a second after knocking people away for more than 10 feet. More than 10 Connate experts led by Xingyao followed him around. They had arrived right in front of Su Zimo. They had swords and sabers ready. There were glint and flash of cold steel everywhere, dazzling and glaring. The most important thing was that the swords and sabers were all directed at Su Xiaoning. Su Zimo only had one pair of hands. He was unable to block the advancing weapons from more than 10 experts. There was a vicious glare in Su Zimo's eyes. He changed his stance, with his back facing the experts, protecting Su Xiaoning as he tried to fight his way out. He executed ground-rupturing palm with his left hand while his right hand executed the killing technique of bovine-tongued saber. Poof! No one was spared with the use of his ground-rupturing palm. Su Zimo's right hand might seem soft, however, as he waved his hands in the air, more than 10 weapons were shattered to pieces, scattering all over the ground. Su Zimo looked domineering and imposing. He was like a man-eating beast. He was too aggressive and powerful. Pierce him! Su Zimo staggered, uttering a small sound. There was blood on his back. Although the Connate experts were unable to hurt Su Zimo, Xingyao made use of the chance to make a slash on Su Zimo's back. The wound was more than 1 foot long. It was gruesome and hideous. Su Xiaoning's eyes might have been covered, but she could sense what was going on. "Brother, you should leave. Don't bother about me," Su Xiaoning sobbed. Su Zimo clenched his teeth, a murderous gleam in his eyes as he said coldly, "Everyone who stopped me shall die." Bang! Su Zimo executed Plow Heaven Stride. He exerted strength in his legs and there were 2 chasms on the ground, gravel flying everywhere. The gravel contained the force of Plow Heaven Stride as well. When the gravel hit onto the people in the crowd, it would cause a huge destruction. Many of the broken weapons were being kicked into the crowd by Su Zimo. In a blink of an eye, Su Zimo had dashed to the surrounding wall of the courtyard of Zhao family's residence. Along the way, Su Zimo sustained 2 more wounds on his body. One of them was in the middle of his back. It was a close shave. If it was a few inches closer, Su Zimo would have died. Su Zimo finally appreciated the power of body tempering Sutra. He gradually understood the benefits of soaking in the dark liquid for the past 3 months. If it was someone else, they would be exhausted from the loss of blood. However, Su Zimo's wounds were not as serious as it seemed. Every wound had begun to harden, and he did not lose a lot of blood from it. Of course, if Su Zimo was able to achieve initial success at body petrification, the thunderbolt saber that Xingyao had would not be able to hurt him. Su Zimo protected Su Xiaoning by standing in front of her. They leaned against the wall, facing the crowd. His green robe was torn and tattered and stained with blood. He swept his gaze over the crowd. There was a burning and murderous glitter in his eyes. He was fearless. The crowd could tell Su Zimo's intention from his position. Su Xiaoning stood with her back facing the wall. Su Zimo no longer had to worry about the enemies attacking her from the back and was able to launch an aggressive attack on the enemies. As long as Su Zimo remained standing, no one could hurt Su Xiaoning. "He won't be able to last for long. Kill him!" Xingyao gave a loud shout and launched his attack. Su Zimo squinted his eyes, fixing his gaze on Xingyao. Xingyao was the only one among the crowd who posed a threat to him. To be exact, it was his thunderbolt saber that was able to threaten him. Swish! The long saber broke through the crowd. It was a fearsome sight. Su Zimo was oblivious to all the other weapons. He stretched his palm and held the thunderbolt saber. Rap, hit, pull! Seng Yao's countenance changed. He yelled before the thunderbolt saber was grabbed away from him. If other weapons were being shrouded by the power of bovine-tongued saber, they would have shattered to pieces. But thunderbolt saber was still intact, and it landed in Su Zimo's hands. Su Zimo grabbed the saber with the back hand, waving it around, blocking the advancing weapons. Clang! 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 All the advancing weapons were cut into 2 pieces by thunderbolt saber. Good saber! Su Zimo laughed loudly. He took a big stride forward, swinging the saber at Tang Mingjun, who lunged toward him. Tang Mingjun's pupil constricted, there was no way to dodge. Blades of light flashed. Tang Mingjun was cut into 2 pieces by Su Zimo, blood spewing everywhere. Su Zimo did not know any saber techniques, but the body tempering sutra was meant to cultivate one's body. If his body was powerful and fast enough, although he did not know of any proper strokes, he would be able to cause great damage. After striking with the saber, Su Zimo returned to his spot right away, guarding Su Xiaoning. Xing Yao lost his thunderbolt saber, but there were still hundreds of people advancing on Su Zimo. However, they could not pose any threat to him. The situation had changed subtly. No matter how the crowd attacked Su Zimo, they could not hurt him at all. Whenever Su Zimo had the chance, he would take the initiative to attack and kill 1 or 2 people. Su Zimo was invincible when he had no weapons. Now that he had Thunderbolt Saber with him, his power was redoubled. The people who besieged Su Zimo gradually reduced. Initially, there were a dozen Connate experts, but right now only 4 of them were trying their best to hold off Su Zimo's attack. The reason why they did not retreat was because they hoped that Su Zimo would be drained of his energy eventually. After all, one would not have endless amounts of energy. Moreover, everyone had witnessed it for themselves that Su Zimo had several wounds on his body. This fight had lasted for nearly 4 hours. If it was someone else, given that he had several wounds on his back, and he had been engaging in intense brawls, he would have died from excessive blood loss. But Su Zimo did not seem the least exhausted. All along, Su Zimo had a ferocious gleam in his eyes. Even after engaging in the fight for 4 long hours, his gaze seemed to be burning and he was stronger after more fights. Not knowing how long had passed, Su Zimo held Su Xiaoning's hands after chopping yet another man. Together they advanced toward the crowd slowly, looking awe-inspiring. While Su Zimo advanced, Xing Yao and the rest retreated step by step, fear and terror evident in their eyes. All of a sudden, the crowd realized that the predators had become the prey. Su Zimo lowered his head, looking at the long saber that was still dripping with blood, saying softly, "All of you shall not leave today." Chapter 12 Night Conversation. Chapter 12 Night Conversation. The ground shook turbulently. Thunderous sounds of hooves could be heard. Under the sunset, a group of steel-armored cavalry armed with long spears charged into Pingyang town ferociously. The leader was Lu Yu, the guard of the Su residence. "Hurry, hurry!" Lu Yu urged the army constantly, his forehead perspiring and his expression full of anxiety. It had been 3 hours since Su Zimo left the Su residence. At the moment, even the calm and collected Uncle Jing revealed great worries in his eyes. Lu Yu's gaze focused on a few people nearby with ghastly pale faces fleeing in panic towards his direction. They seemed to be terrified. "These few people are the guards of the Zhao family." A murderous intent rose in Lu Yu's heart immediately. He wanted to order his troops to surround them. Uncle Jing suddenly said, "Don't bother about them. Go to the Zhao residence to save people first." From the moment that they entered the Pingyang town and made their way to the Zhao residence, Uncle Jing and the others saw about a dozen pugilistic experts. All of them were dashing out of the place desperately, looking panic-stricken. "What is going on?" Uncle Sheng and Lu Yu felt very uneasy. Not long after, Uncle Xing and Lu Yu led the hundreds of cavalry to the doors of the Zhao residence. Just as they were about to break in, the doors of the Zhao residence suddenly opened. A man and a woman stepped out of it. The young girl's eyes were covered with a few layers of cloth strips that had been splattered with drops of blood. Her thin face looked ghastly pale and her delicate frame quivering. She looked so pitiful that one could not help but sympathize with her. The man's clothes were torn, tattered and badly stained with fresh, red blood. He was carrying a long blood-stained knife in his left hand and holding onto the girl with his right hand, slowly making his way out of the doors of the Zhao residence. Everyone's gaze inadvertently drifted across this pair of man and woman to the courtyard of the Zhao residence. It was a creepy scene that one would not forget for life. In the courtyard, dead bodies were scattered all over the ground. Scarlet blood was flowing quietly in between the cracks of the stones. Some people's bodies had been split into half, some of their skulls shattered into pieces, and some of the heads and bodies separated with broken limbs twitching. The deathly aura was pervasive. Smell of blood filled the air. This was simply a terrifying and sinister place of eternal hell. The man was drenched in blood. Carrying a long knife, he looked like a slayer who had just emerged from hell. Nevertheless, his gaze was still bright and clear. When the afterglow of the sunset landed on the exquisite and youthful face of that man, it cast a vague and mysterious glow on it. There was pin-drop silence among the hundreds of cavalry. Seemingly suppressed by an invisible and imposing aura, even the fierce horses beneath them lowered their heads and kept quiet out of fear. To everyone, the Su Zimo at this moment was both strange and familiar. Su Xiaoning seemed to have sensed something. She could not help but tear off the strips of cloth covering her eyes and turn towards the courtyard of the Zhao residence. Su Zimo reached out his palm and blocked her sight. He said gently, "Don't look. Go home and rest. Forget about today's matter. Uncle Jing, Uncle Lu, send Xiaoning back to the residence." Su Zimo sounded very calm, but somehow, everyone present felt very nervous. Uncle Jing nodded and Lu Yu immediately went forward to help Xiaoning onto the horse. He then personally escorted her back to the Su residence. After watching Lu Yu and the group leave, Su Zimo strode off gradually. His strides were heavy, leaving a long trail of bloody footprints. It was a ghastly and horrifying sight. "Second young master, you." With his back facing everyone, Su Zimo waved his hands and said, "Don't follow me." The hundreds of cavalry did not move. No one dared to question or oppose him. It was only until when Su Zimo's figure disappeared at the end of the long street that everyone heaved out a long sigh of relief. Facing this seemingly frail-looking second young master of the Su family, these warriors who had experienced gutsy massacres actually felt overwhelmed by him. "Mr. Jing, it seems that most of the people inside are dead. There are a dozen of Connate experts, and also the family masters of both the Zhao and the Li family." Yu Qihua ran out from the courtyard of the Zhao family and said in a low voice. There was a commotion. At the sight of the horrible scene in the courtyard of the Zhao family, everyone was already mentally prepared. However, no one expected a dozen Connate experts to lose their lives in this place in just half a day. Most importantly, the family masters of both the Zhao family and Li family were dead. In addition, hundreds of pugilistic experts had been killed. It meant that these two big family clans had technically been eliminated from Pingyang town. Did second young master kill all these people? This was a doubt in everyone's heart. Yu Qihua frowned and said, "Mr. Jing, from what I understand from young master and Lu Yu, second young master could barely compete with early-stage Connate expert 3 months ago. Why did he become so scary after 3 months?" Mr. Jing looked perplexed. He sighed. "We have been guarding some secrets and refusing to talk about them. Our second young master. I'm afraid he also has many secrets." Su Zimo returned to his own mansion. His face revealed a deep fatigue the moment that he closed the door. He did not lose a lot of blood from the few wounds on his body. However, the pain was still unbearable. Furthermore, Su Zimo had been killing continuously for 3 hours without a moment of rest. The muscles all over his body were already sore and swollen. Su Zimo sat down for a while to rest before entering the cultivation field. After half a year, Su Zimo realized that he had inadvertently become very reliant on the cultivation field. He had the feelings of homecoming when he was back. Daiyu remained seated on the green stone with a cold and indifferent expression. She did not even look at Su Zimo. However, no one had any idea of when the wooden barrel had been filled with a pitch-dark medicinal liquid that was emitting a faint medicinal scent. Su Zimo conveniently threw the thunderbolt saber aside. He dragged his heavy body and climbed into the barrel. He could feel the icy cold medicinal liquid, but his heart was warm. Su Zimo fell asleep unknowingly. During the past 6 months of cultivation, the body-tempering breathing method had already become his habit. Even in his sleep, Su Zimo could still cultivate and absorb the essence of the medicinal liquid to harden and refine his skin and flesh. The killings this time had made Su Zimo experience the crux of body petrification. If Su Zimo was conscious, he would be shocked to discover that the wounds on his body were healing at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. The reasons were twofold. First, his body had a strong regeneration ability after cultivating the body-tempering Sutra. Second, it was due to the boundless essence that originated from the medicinal liquid. The first absorption was much faster than usual. Su Zimo woke up only after 3 hours of sleep. All of his previous fatigue had been swept away, and he was full of vigor and energy. Su Zimo felt something was different. He touched the wounds incurred today but did not feel any scars. There was only skin that was as smooth and fine as jade. Such powerful healing ability! Su Zimo was secretly astonished. Simultaneously, an idea flashed across Su Zimo's mind. He mentally cultivated the body petrification quietly. Su Zimo could clearly feel the tightening of his muscles instantly. Every inch of his flesh was squeezed together without any gap. They were as hard and firm as a rock. This is also considered a blessing in disguise, Su Zimo secretly thought and said. Without the trigger of these external injuries, it is most likely very difficult to understand the profound meaning of body petrification in such a short time. Su Zimo got up and said to Daiyu, "I'm going out." Daiyu did not seem to have heard him. She seemed to be resting with her eyes closed. Su Zimo walked out of the cultivation field, returned to his mansion, and changed into a green robe. He headed to the Su residence directly. Su Zimo had pent-up frustrations in his heart regarding today's matter. However, it was not targeted at the Zhao family and Li family. Instead, it was targeted at the Su family and his older brother Su Hong. At this moment, the night was pitch dark and the streets were isolated. Su Zimo used the plow heaven's stride and dashed ahead crazily. Soon after, he arrived at the Su residence. The doors of the Su family were not tightly shut. Instead, it was wide open. Su Zimo pondered for a while before heading to Uncle Zheng's living quarters. The courtyard was not big. There was a round stone table in the middle of it. Uncle Zheng was just sitting there. He seemed to have waited for a long time. "Second young master, you eventually still came." Uncle Zheng was a little emotional. Su Zimo sat beside the stone table and looked into both the eyes of Uncle Zheng. He said in a deep voice, "Since you know the intent of my visit, is Uncle Zheng still going to keep it from me?" Uncle Zheng bitterly smiled and shook his head. "Since a young age, older brother forbade us from learning martial arts. He sent me away to study and forbade us from intervening in the family business. There are too many things. Older brother had intentionally or unintentionally distanced Xiaoning and me from the Su family. Xiaoning is simple and innocent and doesn't sense it. But I have long noticed this," Su Zimo said softly. "If Xiaoning had learned martial arts since she was a child, today's matter might not have happened. I can tell that those people behind Uncle Zheng today are all postnatal experts who had been through countless fights and battles. Since our family clan has such strength and power, why didn't we reveal them earlier? What business is older brother into? Is he only selling horses? Why did he go to the country of Yen and not country of Diqi to do business?" Uncle Zheng looked like he was in a difficult position. He wanted to say something but held back his tongue. The two faced each other in silence. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly stifling. Su Zimo's words were startling when he spoke suddenly. Were my parents murdered by someone? Uncle Veng's countenance suddenly changed. However, it reverted to normal in the next moment. Uncle Jing, Zimo is not the once frail and weak scholar. I believe you have also seen it yourself. What exactly is the Su family afraid of? Who is the Su family's enemy? Tell me. Su Zimo held on to Uncle Jing's arm, his eyes shining sinisterly and coldly. Uncle Jing gave a long sigh. Second young master, it is not that I don't want to say it. It is just that telling you won't do you any good. Certainly you are different from before. You have become stronger and can even kill many Connate experts. But, after pausing for a while, Uncle Jing shook his head and said, After all, these are still just the strength of mortals. These words seemed familiar. Half a year ago, before she left, Shimingchi had told Su Zimo that even if he were to attain the postnatal or Connate realms in the future, they are only of mortal strength and could not withstand even a blow of the immortals. Su Zimo understood what Uncle Jing was implying. However, he did not expect that the enemy of the Su family had been the legendary immortal cultivators since a long time ago. In addition, Su Zimo himself had incidentally offended a perfected golden core. All these events seemed to be part of destiny. After numerous twists and turns, they still could not get out of it. At what realm is the enemy of the Su family at? Chi Refinement Warrior? Foundation Establishment Cultivator or Perfected Golden Core? Su Zimo asked calmly. He had long heard from Daiyu that mortals at the Chi Condensation realm were called Chi Refinement Warrior. There were 10 levels and the 10th level was the perfected level. Those in the Foundation Establishment realm could be called a cultivator. Only those in the Golden Core realm were qualified to be called perfected. You! Obviously, Uncle Jing was surprised that Su Zimo actually knew the terms of cultivation. His expression was full of shock. After some time, Uncle Jing said, The Foundation Establishment Cultivator and Perfected Golden Core are far beyond our reach. Ordinary mortals are certainly not a match for even the Chi Refinement Warrior. You may be able to kill the Connate experts now. However, even a level 1 Chi Refinement Warrior can kill you. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Naturally, Su Zimo did not believe Uncle Zheng's words. According to Daiyu, demon cultivation was also a kind of cultivation of Tao. It was definitely not any lesser than the 3 sects of Immortal, Buddha and Fiend. He had already mastered the body-tempering section of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Could he not defeat even a level 1 Chi Refinement Warrior? Furthermore, the 2 massacres during the half a year had boosted Su Zimo's confidence greatly. Uncle Jing, do you mean that you will tell me everything and no longer keep the truth from me if I am powerful enough to attack and kill the Chi Refinement Warrior? Su Zimo asked again. This? Uncle Jing said hesitatingly. Second young master, you don't have the spirit root. You can only be immortal for life. Ultimately, you won't be a match for the immortals. Su Zimo sneered. He thought of what Daiyu had said before and casually commented. What kind of immortals are Chi Refinement Warrior considered as? Even the perfected Golden Core dare not be so impudent to call themselves immortal. When Daiyu said this, Su Zimo was stunned and speechless by her supercilious and domineering aura that belittled the heaven and earth. Now, Uncle Jing had the same expression on his face. His jaws dropped slightly and his face was filled with shock. Let's wait for young master to be back before we talk about this again. Uncle Jing finally spoke. Okay, I will ask older brother when he is back. Su Zimo did not stay behind. He turned and left. Chapter 13 Songlang Mountain Range. Chapter 13 Songlang Mountain Range. Su Zimo took the chance to return to the cultivation field when it was still dark. At the sight of Daiyu, he asked, Miss Dai, I have already mastered body tempering. Although I have only attained initial success, I should have some chances of defeating the level 1 Chi Refinement Warrior? You will die for sure. Daiyu glanced at Su Zimo and said coldly, Zimo stood dazedly on the ground. He could not hide the disappointment in his eyes. He had felt quite disdainful when he heard Uncle Zheng's words earlier, as he thought that he could suppress the Qi refinement warrior easily. He did not expect. As such, doubts rose in Zimo's heart at this moment. Since demon cultivation was also a form of the cultivation of Tao, why was it that he could not even defeat a level 1 Qi refinement warrior? Yu seemed to have read Zimo's mind. She said nonchalantly, "Your current strength is enough to kill a level 4 Qi refinement warrior. However, you don't have a good understanding of combat. There are too many factors that can influence combat, and strength is only one of them. Kill a level 4 Qi refinement warrior!" Zimo was stunned. He gradually recovered from his senses. So, it was not that he was not powerful enough but because he lacked the combat techniques. It was akin to a peerless knife that would unleash varying degrees of potency, depending on whose hands it landed in. Since that was the case, Zimo still felt a little indignant. He raised his voice. "I know a little about fighting. When I was rounded up by hundreds of pugilistic experts, I can also carve out a path amidst the adversity. You have been beaten up so miserably by a group of mortals. Yet you think that it is something worth bragging about it." Yu sneered. She waved her hands lightly. Seemingly led by an invisible force, the thunderbolt saber that was initially pierced in the ground rose and floated in the air. "Gee!" A few feet away, Yu stretched out her finger and pointed at Zimo's direction. Swoosh! Blades of light flashed. The thunderbolt saber had already appeared in front of Zimo's eyes. It was hanging in front of his glabella without moving an inch. It was too fast. He did not even have the time to react. Yu said with a lazy drawl, "This is the most common attack stroke of Qi refinement warrior, making use of spirit Qi to control the spirit weapon. If you are fighting with the Qi refinement warrior, you will be dead meat by now. As so fast? How do I dodge it?" Zimo was a little dazed. Yu said, "There are two abilities in Demon that are far beyond that of the cultivators. First, a strong and powerful body. Second, an acute spirit perception. You must remember, most of the cultivators' bodies are relatively weak. As long as you can avert their first wave of attack and take the chance to shorten the distance between the both of you, you will be able to make use of the strong and powerful close combat ability of the demon clan to slay them." Zimo frowned and pondered deeply. After some time, he asked, "I understand what is meant by strong and powerful body. The objective of body tempering is to train the body. But what is spirit perception?" Yu said, "It is hard to explain spirit perception. You can take it that it meant alertness and sense of danger. The demon clan believed in jungle laws and the survival of the fittest. If you don't have a keen spirit perception, you will be eliminated and your entire family annihilated. The cicada senses it before the autumn wind approaches?" Zimo's eyes shone brightly. Yu nodded. "How do I cultivate the spirit perception?" Zimo asked again. "Simple." The corners of Yu's mouth curled up slightly. With an odd smile, she suddenly waved the sleeves of her robes and swirled towards Zimo. Swoosh! Space became contorted and everything turned black. Zimo felt that he had lost all his senses. In the next moment, it seemed that he had been brought to another place. "Where am I?" After Zimo regained his senses, he looked around. There was pin-drop silence in the surroundings. It was pitch black and exuding an aura of primitive wilderness. A peculiar atmosphere filled the air. Yu casually said, "This is the Tsanglang mountain range. If you can survive here for 1 year, you will have successfully cultivated the spirit perception." Zimo was stunned. The Tsanglang mountain range was about a few tens of kilometers from Pingyang town. It was famous for being a dangerous terrain. Dominated by demons and beasts, there was danger at every step. There was absolutely no way that one could pass through this place at night. Previously, he had heard many legends about the Tsanglang mountain range. There were fiendish demons that suck in human essence and energy, as well as fearsome beasts with eyes like bronze bells. Of course, the lord of Tsanglang mountain range were the wolves, which were the majority. Bloodthirsty and brutal, they definitely bore grudges. A few decades ago, a hunter from a nearby village caught a small wolf from Tsanglang mountain range. Unexpectedly, that same night, the entire village had been devoured and wiped out by thousands of wolves. Even fowls and dogs were not spared. It had become a ghostly village that no one dared to live at. The surrounding states could not do anything about the Tsanglang mountain range. None of the armies dared to venture deep into the place. Not to mention surviving in it, it was as difficult as reaching the sky just to pass through it safely and unscathed. Daiyu continued to say, "There is a difference in realms between the demons too. Those at the lowest realm are not even qualified to be called a demon. They are termed as spirit beasts in the cultivation arena, meaning, they are beasts that can understand humans. There are weak and strong spirit beasts. That Jui Feng of yours is considered the weakest kind of spirit beast. Its spirit intellect had just been activated. For powerful spirit beasts, their ability is comparable to a perfected chi refinement warrior. Above the spirit beast is the spirit demon. There is an even greater gap between the weak and strong ones. The strong ones are comparable to perfected golden core. The weak ones are equivalent to foundation establishment cultivators." Su Zimo frowned and asked, "Are there spirit demons in Tsanglang mountain range?" According to Daiyu, he could not even defeat the most commonplace chi refinement warrior, let alone the spirit demons whose abilities were equivalent to the foundation establishment and golden core realms. "I don't know." Daiyu smiled imperceptibly. Su Zimo was stunned. What kind of answer was that? Su Zimo believed that it was impossible that Daiyu did not know. The only possibility was that Daiyu did not wish to tell him. Daiyu said calmly, "This is a test. If you can survive, you will completely transform and unleash the true powers of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. If you can't endure it, you will no doubt be shared and devoured by the spirit demons. Everything will end then." Su Zimo realized that if he were to survive in the Tsanglang mountain range for 1 year, he would definitely face various kinds of spirit beasts. Danger would be lurking in every corner. This was a cruel test. Of course, it was also a form of training. A life and death experience. In the moments of struggle between life and death, one could mold a strong and powerful spirit perception. Daiyu said, "It's not too late to regret now. If you decide to stay here, I won't take care of you. If I don't see you in Pingyang town 1 year later, I will leave on my own." "Regret?" Su Zimo smiled. Be it Zhou Dingyun who could come back to look for him at any point in time, the enemy of the Su family, or to seek revenge for Zhui Feng, he did not have a choice. "I will return alive in 1 year's time." In the darkness, Su Zimo's eyes were bright and clear, and firm and resolute. He requested a brush and paper from Daiyu and wrote the words, "I will be away for some matters. Please don't miss me." Su Zimo folded the paper and passed it to Daiyu. He said, "Find a way to send this to the Su residence. Uncle Jing recognizes my handwriting." Daiyu nodded and said, "There are still 3 hours to dawn. I will impart the tendon's transformation section to you and leave before dawn. You only have 3 hours to cultivate. Make full use of the time." A page of Sutra verses appeared in Su Zimo's mind again. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Body tempering is the foundation. If the flesh and skin are not hard and strong enough, when one cultivate tendon's transformation, the body will swell and explode amidst the contraction, expansion and pulsation of the large tendons. The cultivator will become paralyzed. The tendon's transformation method originates from the Anaconda Demon King and the Sanguine Ape Demon King. Cultivate the Anaconda section, followed by the Ape section. Anaconda is the most agile one. It has the ability to cut swathes, twist and coil as well as bend and stretch. Apes are adept at climbing the mountains and ascending the rocks. Upon the initial success of tendon's transformation, the body's resilience will increase tremendously. It will be as agile as the python and as light as the ape. It will rise like the wind and fall like an arrow. Your strength will also increase. The pulsating sound of the large tendons will be similar to that of the vibration of bowstrings. Upon phenomenal success, the three body parts, skin, flesh, and tendons, will be in perfect harmony. One will be able to expand and contract the muscles and change his figure or appearance. No one will be able to see through him unless the perfected nascent soul make use of his detection methods to do so. Yu spoke about the profound meaning of tendons transformation tirelessly. In the deep forest, it was dark and silent. Even the cicadas were not making any sound. It was only resonating with the pleasant and lazy-sounding voice of a lady. The green-robed scholar beside the lady was focused and listening attentively. Time passed and the dark sky gradually faded. When the first ray of sunlight broke through the mist and landed in the forest, Yu stopped and turned to Su Zimo. She said softly, "I'm leaving." In Su Zimo's memory, he had never seen Yu speaking to him with such a tone. For some unknown reason, there was a strange feeling in Su Zimo's heart. As if he had been possessed, Su Zimo asked, "If I encounter any danger, will you really leave me in the lurch?" Su Zimo regretted as soon as he finished his words. "True enough," Yu sneered. "What has your life and death got to do with me?" These words seemed very cold-blooded and inhuman. After inviting a snub, Su Zimo looked embarrassed. He was silent. Yu turned and left. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared into the dense forest. Su Zimo's lonely figure remained rooted to the ground. Just as Su Zimo was feeling a little disappointed, Yu's voice rang again. It became increasingly distant and gradually faded off. Sanglang Mountain Range is the world of demons, especially at night. If you can tide over the first month, you will have 30% chances of leaving it alive in 1 year's time. Su Zimo was stunned. No matter what, Yu was not completely unconcerned about him. Otherwise, there was no need for her to impart the tendon's transformation to him last night. There is only a 30% chance of survival after enduring the first month? Su Zimo was secretly shocked. He assessed the surroundings with vigilance. After confirming the absence of danger, he tied the Thunderbolt saber on his back and sat cross-D to recall the contents of the Tendon's Transformation Sutra. If he wished to survive in the Sanglang Mountain Range, he would have to master the Tendon's Transformation as soon as possible. According to Yu, his ability would be of a threat to the level 8 Qi Refinement Warrior upon attaining the initial success of Tendon's Transformation. This also meant that he could slay most of the spirit beasts in the Sanglang Mountain Range. His chance of survival would increase tremendously. Su Zimo constantly used the breathing and expiration method and diligently tried to comprehend the tendon's transformation. It could be due to the foundation of the body tempering or the pressure of being in danger. Not long after, Su Zimo managed to master the initial stage of the tendon's transformation breathing method. He did not need Yu's reminder this time. Su Zimo combined the sutras of both body tempering and tendons transformation and cultivated them simultaneously. With each breathing and expiration, Su Zimo was hardening and refining not only his flesh and blood but also his large tendons. He had become more flexible and powerful. Su Zimo was immersed in the cultivation and had forgotten his whereabouts. After an unknown period of time, Su Zimo suddenly felt a liquid-like substance dropping onto his face. It felt a little warm and sticky. Is it raining? Just as this thought arose, Su Zimo opened both his eyes immediately. His countenance changed greatly. Wrong. How could raindrops feel warm and sticky? Su Zimo was instantly jolted awake. He finally realized that he was in the danger-filled Sanglang Mountain Range and not the original cultivation field. There was danger. Chapter 14 Fiendish Appearance. Chapter 14 Fiendish Appearance. Unprecedented feelings of fear arose and Su Zimo felt his scalp blistering. He had goosebumps all over his body. Su Zimo's reflexes kicked in and both his lower limbs moved to flee before he even stood up completely. Swoosh! A malicious and stinking breeze attacked in his direction, and Su Zimo dodged it just in time. He could not help but look back. Su Zimo's pupils contracted violently. Instantly, his heart was in his throat. This was an anaconda that was beyond Suzumo's recognition. Its humongous body was as thick as a water barrel. Covered tightly with scales, its body shone with a cold and metallic luster. It was glaring at Suzumo with greenish, squinted eyes and big predaceous mouth. Saliva was continuously dripping from in between its teeth. He was too careless. Suzumo still had some lingering fear. He had been approached by such a large species and he actually did not sense it at all. The anaconda curled itself around an old tree that was as tall as the clouds and looked down at Suzumo from the great heights. There was a flash of contempt in his eyes. This was a spirit beast. This kind of human-like glances appeared in an anaconda. It was evident that it was psychic and as intelligent as humans. It was just that it could not speak human language. Although there was a huge gap in size between the python and human, Suzumo did not look the slightest bit afraid after he calmed down. On the contrary, he was very eager to try. This was a rare opportunity. The python's gaze was cold and sinister. It attacked first. The humongous body dropped onto the ground and twisted a few times in the grass. All was quiet. In the blink of an eye, it had slithered to Suzumo with intelligent movements and lightning speed. Oh no! Suzumo had a great shock. The anaconda slithered over, erratically moving its head. In that instance, he suddenly found it difficult to grasp the chance and had to abolish all of his original plans. If he were to fail in his first strike, he would undoubtedly die. In between flashes of light and stones on fire, Suzumo exerted strength on both his lower limbs. His body backed off rapidly and averted the attacks. At this moment, a surge of evil aura that was as resilient as a knife swept over. Before he could react, his body had been hit firmly at the sweep of the python's tail, and was thrown off. Bang! 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 After crashing into and breaking 3 old trees consecutively, Suzumo fell onto the ground and vomited a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet. This collision had injured him greatly. At this moment, Suzumo felt that the tendons and bones in his body were about to shatter. The pain was unbearable, and he simply did not have any more energy to fight. A difference of 1 stroke actually landed me in such a miserable state. Before he could finish this thought, he sighted the anaconda chasing closely and pouncing on him again. A black shadow engulfed him. Suzumo gritted his teeth, twisted his arm, pulled out the thunderbolt saber on his back and slashed forward with all his might. There were flashes of blood. The anaconda gave a sorrowful cry. A bloody wound appeared on its head. One of the eyes was already blinded. Having suffered such a grievous injury, the humongous body of the anaconda tossed and twisted continuously, causing the surrounding trees to break one by one. The sound and atmosphere was appalling. Suzumo knew that he was definitely not a match for this anaconda despite the latter's injury. Their abilities were not on the same level. Furthermore, he was more seriously injured. If he were to receive another crazy whip by the anaconda, he would definitely die on the spot. Suzumo dared not stay any longer. He fled quickly using the plow heaven's stride. Before he could run far, he felt drained of energy. His chest felt stifled. He could not help but spit out another mouthful of fresh blood. In the battle at the Zhao family, he was covered in blood, but they were caused by external injuries. The Connate expert's strength was not powerful enough to penetrate his skin and flesh. However, the tail of this anaconda not only mangled his chest but also injured his internal organs. If Suzumo had not used the body petrification, that strike was enough to blast his body. Am I going to be buried in this place on the very first day? Suzumo bit the tip of his tongue and tried hard to stay sober. He quietly pondered and said, I must find a good place to hide as soon as possible. Otherwise, any spirit beast that I encounter can kill me easily. After running for a while, he sighted a steep mountain wall in front of him. There was a cave on it a few feet from the ground. Suzumo's eyes lit up. He arrived at the mountain wall and used the thunderbolt saber to dent the walls as he climbed up. Stepping on these dents, Suzumo climbed up the mountain wall and carefully peeped into the cave. He flipped inside after ascertaining that there was no danger. This torture had already exhausted his last bit of strength. The cave was not big and could barely fit 3 people. Fortunately, the location was not bad and could avoid most of the terrestrial beasts. Su Zimo lay in the cave and tried to perk himself up. He used the breathing and expiration method continuously, and the healing power of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness to recover from his injuries. Time passed quickly and the sun was gradually setting. When Su Zimo was following Dai Yu on the first night, he did not feel the horror of the Tsanglang mountain range. Last night, there was complete silence. It was as if all the living things had gone into hiding. Today, the night had just arrived and spirit beasts were already beginning to appear. Sounds of roars shook the wilderness. From time to time, giant birds would fly past the mountain wall, casting their shadows and blocking the moon. In the forest, the spirit beasts prowled fearlessly, the old trees swayed and an eerie atmosphere filled the air. There were constant sounds of terrifying roars. This was the true colors of Tsanglang mountain range. If Dai Yu was not accompanying him last night, he could not even tide over it. Earlier on, Su Zimo saw for himself a spider with a human face as big as a basin. It moved at lightning speed as it climbed towards this wall mountain. To his surprise, a black figure suddenly appeared on the wall mountain, rolled into the spider's body and disappeared in between the cracks of the rocks. When Su Zimo was fear-stricken, he heard a ferocious roar from the sky. Immediately after, a divine eagle with a pair of purple wings appeared out of nowhere. Its super-sharp claws were shining coldly like daggers. It dug into the cracks of the rocks on the wall mountain and crushed a big piece of rock. Roar! A miserable cry could be heard from the crack of the rocks. The purple-winged eagle had already captured a crawling spirit beast. Its claws pierced deeply into the body of the spirit beast, and fresh blood splattered out. This spirit beast was huge. It was 100-fold bigger than the purple-winged eagle. However, it could not escape no matter how it struggled. The purple-winged eagle carried it and soared into the sky. Before it left, the purple-winged eagle had obviously discovered Su Zimo. It even glanced back at the cave on the wall mountain with a chilling glare. It could be that Su Zimo seemed too frail and weak in comparison to that spirit beast. Hence, the purple-winged eagle did not bother. It spread its wings and flew away. That one gaze was enough to land him in trepidation and send chills up his spine. This was a spirit demon. This purple-winged eagle was definitely a spirit demon. It is too powerful. Just the aura that it exuded could make me feel defenseless. I don't know if it is a spirit demon at the Foundation Establishment realm or Golden Core realm. Su Zimo swallowed the lump in his throat. He shifted himself deeper into the cave. In the forest under the wall mountain, there were killings everywhere. The air was moist and filled with a bloody stench. The earlier scene was just the tip of the iceberg. This was the Tsanglang mountain range. Bloody, brutal, and filled with the most primitive slaughters. After surviving the second night with much difficulty, Su Zimo discovered that there was another test awaiting him. One night had passed, but his injuries had not completely recovered. Hence, he dared not continue to cultivate. In Pingyang town, he did not need to worry about food. However, food had become his greatest problem in Tsanglang mountain range. Su Zimo was injured and dared not act rashly. However, without food, each time he breathed in and out, he was using the essence of his own blood and flesh to cultivate. His hunger would increase and he would not be able to endure for too long. It was a vicious cycle. Without food, there was no energy source and he would not be able to cultivate. It would be difficult to heal the injuries on his body and advance to another realm. It was even harder to obtain food. Henceforth, every step that he took would determine his destiny. Su Zimo moved his body and used the thunderbolt saber to dig and deepen the cave. He placed some leaves and branches near the entrance of the cave to camouflage it and hide himself. 1 day. 2 days. Despite the torture of starvation and pain arising from his injuries, Su Zimo waited patiently and did not leave the cave. On the 3rd day, he finally received an opportunity to turn the tides. Last night, there were many killings below the mountain wall. One of the spirit beasts died and a lot of flesh and blood were left on its dead body. Su Zimo stared at the remains of the spirit demon for a long time. After much consideration, he finally made up his mind and walked out of the cave, carrying the thunderbolt saber. Worried that he would attract other spirit beasts, Su Zimo dared not start a fire. He bore with the disgust and devoured the flesh and blood mouthful by mouthful. His eyes surveyed the surroundings continuously, and he was high-strung. He dared not bring this spirit beast back to the cave, for fear that the bloody stench would expose the location of his cave. Only 3 days had passed and his scholarly aura and inexperience subsided. He was strangely calm, as if he belonged to the most primitive human clan. He cautiously struggled to survive in the bleak and remote land, devouring raw flesh and drinking blood. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's appetite had increased greatly. Soon after, he finished off the flesh and blood on this spirit beast. After returning to the cave, he began to cultivate. He discovered the difference when he cultivated. The energy essence contained in the flesh and blood of the spirit beast was richer than that of ordinary cattle and sheep. Taking in this raw flesh and blood allowed the essence to be absorbed into his belly directly without any wastage. Prior to this, after Su Zimo consumed 1 cattle, he would cultivate and drain all the energy from the flesh and blood in just half a day. On this occasion, he cultivated for 1 entire day and night. Of course, the benefit was evident. The injuries caused by the anaconda had completely healed. In addition, the body tempering and tendons transformation realms had advanced substantially. In the time to come, Su Zimo did not venture too far away. He spent most of his time cultivating the tendons transformation in the cave. Occasionally, he would secretly observe the killing techniques of the spirit beast below the mountain wall to comprehend them. After he felt that he had learned something, Su Zimo left the cave to hunt and kill spirit beasts to nurture his spirit perception and polish his martial skills. Although he suffered more losses than victories, was unkempt and covered in wounds at times, Su Zimo could always escape alive with body tempering and tendons transformation as the foundation. In between life and death struggles, he constantly concluded, comprehended, and cultivated. 3 months later, Su Zimo returned to the old place and looked for that anaconda. He then slayed it with his bare hands. Henceforth, Su Zimo completely left the cave that he had been living in. He wandered in countless mountains and ravines, traveled in dense forests and big pools, and engaged in combat with various kinds of birds and spirit beasts. This was a bloodshed world about the survival of the fittest. The so-called most powerful one did not exist. In one moment, one was proud and majestic. In the next moment, he could possibly end up as a prey in the belly of other spirit beasts. There were countless miserable and intensive bloody battles, countless narrow escapes from death, constant vigilance, and constantly on tenterhooks. As time passed by, Su Zimo acquired a unique and indescribable sense of danger. That was spirit perception. In this mountain range that no one paid attention to, a young boy from the human clan without spirit root was undergoing a thorough transformation. A fiendish appearance was taking root. Chapter 15 A Bloody Battle with the Wolves. Chapter 15 A Bloody Battle with the Wolves. 6 months later. In the residence of the city lord of Tsunglang City. Luo Tianwu, the city lord of Tsunglang City, leaned on his chair. Holding on to his chin, his eyes were closed. He was frowning and deep in thought. City lord, did you request for my presence? Shortly after, Chao Gang, one of the 5 wolf guards, walked in, cupped his fists, and bowed to him respectfully. Luo Tianwu opened his eyes. A beam of light streaked across them, but only lasted for a moment. He asked, seemingly casual, "What are your thoughts on the Su family of Pingyang Town?" Chao Gang pondered and said, "The Su family's background is mysterious. Most likely, they are not from our country of Diqi. I suspect that they are from the country of Yen. In addition, the Su family is not as weak as they appear to be. Young Master Su had hidden his ability for many years. He is a figure not to be underestimated. He is most probably hatching a major ploy. As for second young Master Su. Chao Gang paused for a while. Luo Tianwu revealed a look of curiosity. He smiled imperceptibly and asked, "What about second young Master Su? 1 year ago, I witnessed second young Master Su offending the Immortal." Chao Gang shook his head. "This lad is an inexperienced and aggressive youngster. He is initially quite clever and has also attained scholarly honors. His honors had been written off now, and he is reduced to an inferior commoner. We don't need to bother about him." "Quite clever? Ha!" Luo Tianwu smirked. "Chao Gang, your judgment is off this time." "Huh!" Chao Gang was stunned for a moment. "This is the information from my subordinate's spy. Take a look." Luo Tianwu passed a few confidential papers on the table to Chao Gang. Chao Gang swept his gaze across them. His expression gradually changed. Luo Tianwu said in a low voice, "6 months ago, Su Zimo almost destroyed all the pugilistic experts of the Li family, and Zhao family relying on his own strength. These two families have virtually been wiped out, although their names still exist. The Yang family avoided the disaster and took the chance to fawn on the Su family. Now, the Su family is holding the power in Pingyang town. This individual is not a frail scholar. He is a character who is more terrifying than Su Hong. How can this be possible?" Chao Gang was dumbstruck. Luo Tianwu said, "There are 2 possibilities. First, Su Zimo transformed from a frail scholar to a top-notch expert in 6 months' time. Second, Su Zimo concealed his abilities and lied to everyone. Regardless of the possibility, this individual is not a mediocre character. What exactly is this Su family plotting at?" Chao Gang drew his brows together. Luo Tianwu snarled, "People from country of Yen. 15 years ago. By the last name of Su. Combining these few pieces of information, can't you guess? Lord Wooding of the country of Yen, Su Mu," Chao Gang said, his voice trailing off. Luo Tianwu nodded and said regretfully, "Su Mu is considered an outstanding hero. He led tens of thousands of armored cavalry and dominated the battlefields, sweeping up victories wherever they went. How famous and majestic was he then? Which of the surrounding states dared to launch attacks and take over the glory? Unfortunately, he was too foolish. In the end, his outcome was akin to casting the bows aside once the birds are gone, and slaying the lackeys after they have outlived their usefulness." After pausing shortly, Luo Tianwu closed both his eyes, exuding a sharp and imposing aura. He gradually said, "Since there is a lesson drawn from others' mistakes, we can't follow the footsteps of Su Mu. Although the great Zhou King is ruling the 4 states, there are signs of chaos. The dukes are rising in power. It is time to invade the city, seize the territory, and declare ourselves as the king. Chao Gang is willing to obey the city lord, obey the king." Chao Gang was quick to adapt to the circumstance. He changed his address immediately. Luo Tianwu nodded satisfactorily. He said, "Chao Gang, I also have Qi refinement warriors as my backers. I won't act without confidence." At the sound of the 3 words Qi refinement warrior, Chao Gang's eyes lit up and his mood livened up. "Since the Su family has such a background, we can make use of them." Luo Tianwu revealed a playful smile. In the Tsanglang mountain range. After 6 months of wandering in the wilderness, Su Zimo had made tremendous progress in the realm of Tenden's transformation. He was close to initial success. After cultivating the anaconda styles, he had begun to cultivate the ape styles. Most importantly, Su Zimo now possessed a spirit perception that was kin to that of a beast. He was extraordinarily sharp and sensitive. Relying on the spirit perception, Su Zimo had countless narrow escapes from deaths. He even got away from some spirit demons before. However, in the recent 1 month, Su Zimo encountered some trouble. The lord of Tsanglang mountain range, the Wolf clan, that had an astronomical number of members. Su Zimo encountered a wolf preciously. After a bloody battle, he killed it but unexpectedly provoked the endless hunting by the wolves. If he were to fight them on one, most of the wolves were not Su Zimo's match. However, the most terrifying thing about the wolf clan was their patience and acute sense of smell. Su Zimo had escaped from the packs of wolves countless times. But not long after, the wolves would hunt him down again with their keen sense of smell. This manhunt continued for 1 month. If Su Zimo's body was not strong enough or did not have the foundation of the 2 classic demon sections, body tempering and tendons transformation, he would have most probably died of exhaustion. In the long and endless escape, Su Zimo's clothes had long been torn by the spirit beasts during the combats. He was dressed in the random pieces of beast skins and had a gray stubble on his face. He did not look any different from a wild man. In the recent few days, the wolf clan seemed to have sensed that Su Zimo's physique had reached its limit. They hunted him even more closely and harassed him repeatedly. Su Zimo had a few terrifying wounds on his body. Although the bleeding had stopped, they had not healed completely. The wolf packs did not give Su Zimo any time to recover from his injuries at all. Su Zimo clearly knew that his condition would only worsen if this were to continue, but he could not think of any solution to get away from the hunt of the wolf clan. This night, Su Zimo arrived at a valley. Midway at the valley, he stopped in his tracks suddenly. His expression was grave. The cold breeze in his face carried traces of murderous aura. Behind him, pairs of greenish and sinister eyes of wolves appeared. Ferocious gazes were apparent. Wolves walked out from the darkness, filled the entire place and rounded up Su Zimo, who was in the center. On the 2 sides of the valley, there were also many wolves. They were howling at the moon. "You are finally here!" Su Zimo licked his dry and chapped lips. His eyes were filled with a murderous intent. 1 month of sleepless and restless nights had reduced Su Zimo's spirit perception to its worst state. As a result, he had fallen into the situation of being rounded up by the wolf packs. Of course, this period of killing and escape were enough to prove the wits of the wolves. The current situation was also meticulously set up by them. When Su Zimo's strength, energy, and all areas were reduced to their worst states, the wolf packs then launched the final battle. Prior to this, Su Zimo hardly used his saber. On the one hand, he did not know the techniques of using one. On the other hand, he wanted to hone his close combat skills as much as possible. Now, Su Zimo's used a backhand grip and pulled out the Thunderbolt saber in preparation for the last gamble. Howl! The leader of the wolf pack howled on the top of the valley. The wolves on the 2 sides as well as front and back of the valley swarmed in like bees. Poof! Su Zimo's flipped his hands and slashed. He slayed the first wolf that dashed to him into half. Fresh blood was spilling out crazily. Bang! Su Zimo used the ground-rupturing palm with his right hand and smashed the skull of another wolf with all his might, splitting the latter's brains. The killings could not stop the wolves from advancing. On the contrary, it provoked their ferocious nature. Stepping on the corpses of their own clan, the wolves pounced on him continuously. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Su Zimo began to use the plow heaven stride. Carrying the saber in his left hand, punching with his right hand, he dashed across the valley with ease, attacking on his left side and charging on his right. If one was watching the combat by the side, he would be shocked at a discovery. Despite being attacked and round up by dense packs of wolves, Su Zimo could still avert most of the attacks and avoid injuries to the vital points of his body. At the sight of the sharp wolf claws about to pierce into Su Zimo's head, without even looking, he suddenly dodged, punched with his backhand and hurled off a wolf. This was spirit perception. It could sense and avert danger without even looking or listening. In comparison to half a year ago, Su Zimo's methods had become more simple, direct, and succinct. Nevertheless, they were extremely effective. Su Zimo was no longer restrained in his styles. His head, shoulder, wrist, fist, knee, and back could all be used to kill the enemies. This was the close combat techniques that he had honed during the fights. It was filled with the smell of blood. It was swift, sharp, fearsome, and merciless. Pierce. There was now an additional wound on Su Zimo's body. Fresh blood was dripping from it. Although he had the aid of the powerful spirit perception, Su Zimo's body gradually lost its strength under such successive and intense attacks. After a round of fierce and violent killings, the wounds that had not fully healed burst open. Blood was spilling nonstop, causing disharmony in his vital energy and blood flow. Su Zimo felt dizzy and was seeing some stars. I can't hang on for too long. Su Zimo gnashed his teeth and stared at the leader of the wolf pack, which was not too far away. It was about 1 foot tall and the size of a huge elephant. Ignoring the attacks from both sides, he charged forward with all his might with the plow heaven's stride. Mountain Reliance! Bang! 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 A few wolves collided with one another on the spot, spitting blood everywhere. At the same time, Su Zimo also received rampant attacks and suffered many injuries. A piece of his flesh had been torn off by one wolf. Su Zimo's legs wobbled and he nearly knelt on the ground. Seemingly sensing Su Zimo's intent, there was a flash of mockery in the eyes of the lead wolf, whose entire body was as white as snow. At this moment, the wolf packs dispersed, and the lead wolf gradually made his way over like a victor. He was exuding an endless aura of murderous intent. Su Zimo stared at the approaching wolf. The palm of his left hand carrying the sword was drenched in sweat. He quietly took a deep breath, in preparation for the last strike. Today, it was hard for him to escape death. If he could slay the lead wolf before he perished, he considered himself to have gained something. Swoosh! The lead wolf leaped vertically. A violent aura enshrouded the air and charged towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo opened his mouth and took a deep breath, seemingly devouring the sun and the moon. He lifted his chest high. The pulsation of his flesh and blood was visible on the surface of his skin. The large tendons were knotted together, seemingly coiled by countless anacondas. PSST! Flows of air surged into his lungs crazily, giving out a strange noise. Anaconda Eclipse. This was one of the styles of the tendon's transformation section. It enlarged the large tendons and could unleash mighty powers instantly. Su Zimo lifted the thunderbolt saber using one hand, dashed directly to the lead wolf and aimed for its head. At the same time, his right hand threw a surprise attack with the ground-rupturing palm. This was already considered Su Zimo's most powerful strike. There was a flash of fear in the lead wolf's eyes. The humongous figure was extremely agile. It dodged in the air to avoid the thunderbolt saber coming towards him and landed his claw on Su Zimo's chest. Initially, this claw could penetrate Su Zimo's chest directly. However, Su Zimo had smashed his hand on the side of the wolf's body with the ground-rupturing palm at the same time. Roar! The lead wolf howled in pain. It was flung by Su Zimo. After rolling on the ground once, it climbed up rapidly and shook its head, seemingly fine. Su Zimo had already ran out of ideas and energy. Although the sharp wolf claws did not punch through his chest, it had mangled it. Su Zimo was thrown off by the explosive impact from the lead wolf's blow. He looked like a kite with broken strings as he tossed up and then dropped down towards the pack of wolves. Su Zimo had lost all his strength. He swept his gaze across. Beneath him, numerous wolves were salivating and opening their mouth, waiting for the moment that he dropped to tear him to pieces. In the end, I still didn't overcome this. Su Zimo began to feel dazed. At the sight of Su Zimo falling into the pack of wolves, a figure suddenly flashed in the darkness and swayed past him mid-air. It took Su Zimo away from the corners of the mouths of the wolves in passing. Chapter 16 Scarlet Flame Fruit. Chapter 16 Scarlet Flame Fruit. Miss Dai? Su Zimo was startled awake and immediately refuted this thought. A tall, large, and strong-built figure was approaching him. He was covered in long hair and smelled nauseating. How could that be Dai? Su Zimo struggled to open his eyes to catch a clearer glimpse of the person's looks. However, a gush of fatigue overtook him. Su Zimo's vision was getting increasingly blurry. He could vaguely see the dark figure grabbing onto things and swinging to and fro above the valley, his movements extremely swift, agile, and light. Shortly after, He had reached the hilltop of the valley and got away from the wolf pack's encirclement. Ga! Ga! The black figure looked back at the numerous wolves in the valley and gave out an eerie laughter. Thereafter, carrying Suzumo, with 2 to 3 moves at a time, he disappeared into the forest. Not knowing how long had passed, Suzumo gradually regained his consciousness and struggled to sit up. He was in pain all over and his muscles were numb and aching. Suzumo looked down and saw that some unknown herbs had been applied on his wounds. They felt light and cool. The rest of the body parts without injuries had also been smeared with some unknown material that emitted a foul and repulsive stench. Suzumo drew his brows and looked around. This was a rather wide and spacious cave without an extraordinary appearance. However, many wolf skins were hanging on the walls. At this moment, gurgling sounds could be heard coming from the entrance of the cave. A tall and big figure snuggled in. The way he walked was a little odd. He seemed to be tiptoeing and leaping. Suzumo focused his sight and was stunned on the spot. What came in was not a man but a monkey. He had actually been saved by a monkey? Suzumo's mood was a little complicated. During the past 6 months at Sunlang Mountain Range, there were at least 800 to 1,000 spirit beasts that died in his hands. He did not expect himself to be saved by a spirit monkey in the end. This spirit monkey looked very ordinary. It had super long forelimbs that exceeded the knees when hung down. A dot of red light was swirling in the depths of his eyes. It was a little strange and mysterious. Thank you? Suzumo cupped his fists at the spirit monkey. The spirit monkey pursed his lips in a human-like manner. He did not reciprocate Suzumo's gratitude. It waved its hands, pointed at the wolf skins on the wall, and chattered Walla Walla for some time. Lastly, the spirit monkey pointed at Suzumo, extended one of its fingers and swaying it from side to side in a mocking manner. It was spiritually enlightened. Besides not knowing how to speak, this spirit monkey was no different from an ordinary man. The spirit monkey could convey the emotions of an adult perfectly with gestures and expressions. Suzumo could not stifle his laughter. He tried to probe by asking, "Do you mean to say that you didn't wish to save me at all? It is because you have an enmity with these wolves?" The spirit monkey opened his mouth and smiled. It nodded. "Since that is the case, we have a common enemy. We can join forces in the future." Suzumo had been enduring loneliness in the Sunlang Mountain Range for the past 6 months. He also wished to have someone that he could talk to. The spirit monkey before him was extremely intelligent, and was no different from a human. It would make an excellent confidant. Spat! The spirit monkey spat and gave a disdainful look. He made a gesture, showing his contempt to Suzumo, seemingly mocking Suzumo for being too weak. Suzumo was stunned and speechless. He had been looked down on by a monkey. After all, it was his savior monkey. Hence, it was not good for Suzumo to say anything. He looked a little awkward. Suzumo glanced at the sky through the cave entrance. Suddenly, a doubt arose in his heart. He had been unconscious for at least 1 day. This time, the wolf packs actually did not chase over? At the smell of that pungent stench on his body, Suzumo's eyes shone. He could not help asking, "Do you have a way to cover my body smell to avoid the wolf's sense of smell?" Gaga gaga! Upon hearing this question, the spirit monkey opened his big mouth and laughed complacently. His eyes were filled with mockery and laughter. Looking at the spirit monkey, Suzumo suddenly had a bad premonition. Thereafter, he saw the spirit monkey bending and squatting down, showing the posture of passing motion and placing his palms to catch something below his butt. He then wiped the mess all over his body. "The thing that is smeared on my body is your poop?" Suzumo turned pale. He asked after much difficulty. "Gagaga!" The spirit beast lifted his head and laughed out loud. He waved his arms and skipped around, as if he had done something proud and great. Suzumo had the feeling of being struck by lightning. He endured the urge to sprout profanities, gnash his teeth and say, word by word, "You! This damn money! I!" At the sight of Suzumo's disgust, the spirit monkey looked even more delighted. He chattered, "What? went non-stop and was extremely thrilled. Suzumo gritted his teeth and said, "Damn monkey, I will definitely fight with you when I fully recover." The spirit monkey did not seem to care. It only stood on the same spot and laughed arrogantly while crossing its arms. Suzumo was covered in pain and wounds. He could not do anything to the monkey for the time being. He lay down swiftly on the ground and tried to calm down. Just as he lay down, not far from his head, Suzumo saw a red and lush fruit hanging and swaying slowly. It looked juicy and shiny and emitted a tempting fragrance. Suzumo was thirsty and his mouth dry. Without thinking much, he stretched out his hands and stuffed the red fruit into his mouth. The flesh of the fruit softened as soon as it entered his mouth. The juice was refreshing and sweet, transforming into a surge of warmth into his tummy. The spirit monkey inadvertently witnessed this scene. Its pupils shrank. Sounds of its laughter ceased abruptly. Suzumo sucked his lips, savoring the good taste of this fruit. When he wanted to look for another one of it, he suddenly sensed a murderous aura in the cave. The atmosphere seemed to have turned stiff. Suzumo was stunned. He instinctively sat up but nearly bumped into that big face of the spirit monkey. The spirit monkey glared at Suzumo with bloodshot eyes, gnashing and clenching its teeth, panting heavily. It looked like it could not wait to tear Suzumo apart alive. Suzumo's heart stirred. He vaguely guessed that the fruit that he had eaten earlier was probably not ordinary. "Hey, you disgusted me once. I ate your fruit. We are even now." Suzumo felt a little guilty. Oh! At the sound of Suzumo's words, the spirit monkey was fuming with anger. He was so furious that he jumped up and pounded his chest, making deafening gwang sounds. The spirit monkey dashed towards the mountain wall beside him and hit his head against the wall. Rocks shattered and flew all over. The sound was terrifying. Suzumo was secretly shocked. This spirit monkey was very powerful. He might not be its opponent even if he were to recover fully and was in his best condition. Fortunately, the spirit monkey did not vent its frustration on him. He continued to pound the mountain rocks and almost punched through the mountain walls. At this very moment, Suzumo suddenly felt his belly warming up and turning boiling hot. Flows of warm air surged towards his limbs and bones, emitting endless flows of heat. Suzumo's skin began to redden. It was as if a huge stove was inside him and barbecuing his body. The pain was unbearable. "Pissed!" Suzumo exhaled and looked down. He saw the flesh and blood surrounding his wounds throbbing, integrating and healing at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Only the scars remained thereafter. In the blink of an eye, the scars came off and the skin was rejuvenated to be like before. Even the piece of flesh on the thigh that had been torn by the wolves was repairing itself rapidly at this moment. "Ah!" Suzumo hollered at the sky. He felt like he was exploding. "This is bad. This energy is too strong. My body will burst if this continues." Suzumo did not have the time to think. He circulated body tempering and tendons transformation immediately, and carried out the breathing and expiration techniques. At the same time, Suzumo leaped up vertically with the plow heaven stride. He crazily dashed around the mountain cave, constantly practicing the styles of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. He wanted to vent out this surge of energy. The spirit monkey seemed to be shocked by this scene. He stopped rampaging all over the place. Stunned and with his jaws dropping, it stared at Suzumo, who seemed even crazier than him. A huge surge of unbearable essence energy ran wildly in Suzumo's body, constantly nourishing his body, refining, hardening his skin and stretching his large tendons. He was advancing tremendously in the body tempering and tendons transformation realms. Zun! 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 The large tendons in Suzumo's body throbbed. Sounds of bowstring vibrations could be heard. Initial success of tendons transformation. The body's flexibility and agility had improved. His steps were apparently much swifter and lighter than before. His strength rose rapidly. According to Dayu, as long as he attained initial success of tendons transformation, Suzumo's power was enough to be a threat to a level 8 chi refinement warrior. Despite the case, Suzumo still could not transform the huge source of essence in his body. Suzumo's skin was torn apart, and blood stains covered his body densely. It was a menacing and gruesome scene. What exactly is this thing? Suzumo was terrified. He did not expect that casually taking a fruit almost caused him to lose his life. In fact, this red fruit was famous in the cultivation world. It was the spirit item, Scarlet Flame Fruit, whose flowers bloomed and bore fruit only once in 1,000 years. The Scarlet Flame Fruit contained strong and powerful essence. It was a huge tonic. Its medicinal properties were akin to fire. It was heaty, dry, and explosive. No one dared to take it in its raw form. Most people would supplement it with other spirit medicine and refine it into elixirs to moderate the effect and make it convenient to consume too. If not for the fact that Suzumo was cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and had a strong and powerful physique, he would have been consumed by the heat in the fruit and burned to ashes the moment that he swallowed the Scarlet Flame Fruit. The spirit monkey had guarded the Scarlet Flame Fruit for many years. He was waiting for the Scarlet Flame Fruit to turn ripe in these few days. It initially intended to pick a date and consume this Scarlet Flame Fruit. Unexpectedly, it had been devoured by Suzumo in one gulp. Neither the fruit nor skin was left. One could imagine how frustrated and upset the spirit monkey was earlier. It was just that, now, at the sight that Suzumo was in so much pain, the spirit monkey was frightened. The spirit monkey was extremely intelligent. He could tell that if he was the one who consumed this Scarlet Flame Fruit, he would not end up in a better state. Most likely, he would perish. At the thought of this, the spirit monkey felt a little guilty. No matter what, this calamity of Suzumo was caused by him. The spirit monkey scratched his ears and cheeks and looked at Suzumo, who was in extraordinary pain and red all over. However, he could not think of any solution. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.